Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Adam Strong. Adam Strong was born in 1972 in Cornwall, Ontario, Canada. Very little is known about his family and upbringing. He never got married and didn't have any children. Strong worked at a local gas station and also as a security guard on a movie set. People who knew him described him as eccentric and arrogant, believing he was smarter than others. He enjoyed arguing and trying to prove his point until others agreed, but he wasn't typically aggressive. On September 11, 2017, a fisherman in Oshawa, Ontario, made a disturbing discovery in the city harbor. He found a badly disfigured and decomposed human torso floating in the water. The fisherman immediately reported his finding to the police, who retrieved the remains and sent them to forensics for analysis. Due to the body's severe decomposition, experts had a hard time identifying it. The torso was missing limbs and a head, and its internal organs were gone. The only clues about the victim were that she was a young woman between 18 and 25 years old. Her fingerprints, dental records, and distinguishing features couldn't be used for identification. A partial tattoo on her neck was visible, but its design was impossible to determine due to decomposition. As a result, a DNA analysis was the only remaining option, but no matches were found in the existing database. The police then began investigating cases of young women who had gone missing in recent months. In November 2017, nearly 2 months after the discovery, authorities identified the body as 18-year-old Rory Rush, a high school student who had vanished in mid-August. She was several weeks pregnant at the time of her disappearance. Divers searched the harbor and nearby Lake Ontario shoreline, but no other body parts were found. The time and cause of death remained unknown. Experts examined the body and found numerous severe injuries inflicted while Rory was still alive, suggesting she had been tortured over a long period before her death. This discovery led to a major breakthrough in the investigation. 4 months later, an unexpected twist emerged. In December, the Wood family moved into a house at 19 Macmillan Drive, Oshawa, where they noticed an unpleasant smell. Their downstairs neighbor, 45-year-old Adam Strong, assured them it was just a minor plumbing issue that he would fix soon. The neighbor tried to be friendly and polite, but there was something unsettling about him. When David's wife tried to welcome him with homemade cookies, he refused to let her enter his apartment, instead stepping out into the hallway and quickly closing the door behind him. In that brief moment, she caught a glimpse of his living space, which was in disarray, and was overwhelmed by the foul smell inside. Adam took the cookies, thanked the neighbor, and quickly excused himself. Later, when they crossed paths in the yard, he apologized for not inviting her in, explaining that he was about to start renovations, and his apartment was not presentable at the time. Despite his polite demeanor, he seemed visibly nervous. As the Wood family settled into their new home, they tried to ignore the unbearable smell. However, on December 29th, they finally called a plumber to investigate a sewer blockage, which had intensified the stench. Although the issue seemed minor and easily solvable, the discovery the workers made in the pipes was shocking. Even to experienced forensic experts, human body parts had been found. Sean Fenn, a plumber, and his partner were called to the Wood family's apartment to fix a clogged refrigerator drain. However, when they arrived, they were met with an overwhelming stench, which they soon discovered was coming from the apartment below, belonging to Adam Strong. Upon entering Strong's apartment, the smell intensified, becoming almost unbearable. Sean, an experienced plumber, had never encountered anything so foul-smelling in his career. While working to clear the pipe, Strong's behavior became increasingly strange and nervous. He refused to leave the area, constantly asking questions about the process. The plumbers tried to ignore Strong's antics, but what they discovered next would be shocking. As they extracted the blockage, they found over 10 kilograms of entangled flesh, hair, and bone fragments, including disfigured human fingers. Strong remained surprisingly calm, asking how the remains ended up in the pipe. Fenn immediately called the police, suspecting they had stumbled upon human remains in the pipes. When the police arrived, they confirmed the discovery of human flesh. Instead of denying the allegations, Strong calmly admitted that Rory Rush's body parts were stuck in the pipe, with additional remains stored in his freezer. A search of the freezer revealed a severed head, limb fragments, and more, all packed in plastic bags. The apartment was in disarray, with dirty dishes, rotting food, trash, and empty pizza boxes littering the floor. The police also found numerous adult magazines with sadistic content, as well as intimate toys, gags, whips, handcuffs, and devices for binding and hanging, suggesting a disturbing atmosphere. Adam's social media profiles openly displayed his interest in BDSM practices, with explicit photos and videos. Although he didn't have a long-term partner, several former partners accused him of being abusive, leading to their breakups. He wrote reviews of adult films and magazines, indicating he spent most of his free time consuming such content. Behind his calm exterior, he led a secretive life. The police cordoned off Adam's residence, treating it as a crime scene. The initial investigation suggested that they had a lot of work ahead, with potential discoveries that could be just as shocking as the head found in the refrigerator. Notably, the evidence found led investigators to suspect that the discovered body parts belonged to Rory Hash, whose torso was found in a water body 4 months earlier. A distinctive tattoo on the neck and DNA analysis supported this theory. In Adam's house, investigators found disturbing evidence of a gruesome crime. Hidden among piles of trash were the blood-stained clothes and shoes of Rory Rush, later confirmed to be the missing schoolgirl. The bedroom, where her bed was found, was covered in her blood, with splatters on the walls, furniture, and ceiling. A dissection table was found in the kitchen, suggesting that the suspect had dismembered and gutted the girl there. The entire area was contaminated with blood, skin particles, hair, and bone fragments. The bathroom was equally appalling, with dirt, blood, and signs of brutal acts everywhere. It appeared that Adam had attempted to dispose of the body by flushing it down the toilet in parts, but when this failed, he tried to fix the blockage himself. A large collection of sharp weapons was also found in the house, likely used to dismember the girl's body. Rory Hash was born in 1999 to a single mother, Shannon Dion. Despite her father's absence, Rory grew up in a loving environment. Thanks to her mother and grandmother, her family had a unique background, with her maternal grandfather founding a motorcycle club and being a skilled boxer with ties to the criminal underworld. Rory had a peaceful and carefree childhood, excelled in dance, and was an award-winning student. At 13, she received an award as the best cadet of the year in her local army unit. However, her life took a dramatic turn at 15 when she got introduced to drugs by a friend and became dependent. She began associating with questionable individuals, neglected her studies, and eventually stopped attending school altogether. For about a year, Rory's family tried to get her help for her addiction, but she would relapse every time. At 17, she ran away from home and turned to prostitution to support her drug habit. Then, her mother got her into a specialized program for teenagers with addictions, which forced her into treatment. This time, the efforts paid off, and Rory was able to get back on track. She got a job, studied remotely, and eventually earned her high school diploma. She started planning for college and began a serious relationship with a boy named Anthony. In June 2017, Rory told her mother that she was pregnant and planned to keep the baby. However, Rory's mother didn't know that her daughter had started using drugs again. Rory met with Constable Christopher Crane at a shopping center in mid-August. He had been monitoring her for 18 months to keep her away from negative influences. During their meeting, Rory confessed that she had started using drugs again and lost her job a month prior, often exchanging sexual favors for money or drugs. Constable Crane was deeply disturbed by her revelation and promised to help. He stepped away to make an urgent call to arrange for her hospitalization. However, when he returned, Rory was gone, and the constable was unable to find her. The next day, Rory's mother and uncle took her to the hospital after finding her incoherent due to substance use. They left her in the emergency room queue and stepped out for about an hour. When they returned, they were shocked to discover that Rory had vanished, and sadly, she was never seen alive again. A review of hospital surveillance footage showed that Rory simply got up and left the hospital on her own. Her family reported her missing the next day, but despite an extensive search effort and widespread social media attention, no one was able to find her. It's likely that her addiction led her to seek out drugs at Strong's house, where she may have exchanged sexual favors for them. After Adam alerted the police to the location of the remaining body parts, an investigation was launched. Investigators expected him to cooperate, but instead, he became unresponsive and refused to answer questions at the police station. He remained calm and denied any wrongdoing. Because there was no direct evidence linking him to the girl's murder, Adam was only charged with desecrating a body. His lawyer's efforts to secure bail were unsuccessful, and he was held in jail awaiting trial. The investigators struggled to find an effective approach to questioning him, trying to elicit an emotional response that might provoke a confession. Strong was evasive when questioned about Rory's presence in his house and what he did to her, but openly discussed his fondness for bladed weapons and extensive knife collection. A thorough search of Adam's house uncovered a dirty hunting knife with dried skin fragments that appeared human in a hidden closet. Although the DNA from the knife didn't match Rory's, it belonged to another individual. It took several months to identify the owner of the DNA, but by July 2017, it was established that the traces on the weapon belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, Rory Rush, who had vanished about 10 years prior. Candace Fitzpatrick shared similarities with Rory. Both struggled with substance abuse and legal issues, grew up in troubled families, and had a history of running away from home for months at a time. To survive, she would live with acquaintances and exchange sex for food and drugs. Born in 1989, Candace was 18 when she disappeared. Her family didn't notice her absence initially, and only reported her missing almost 2 years later, by which time all leads had gone cold. Candace's life and social circle led many to believe she could have ended up anywhere. Her parents thought she had run away and held on to the hope that she would return. However, in 2018, the news from law enforcement crushed their hopes of ever seeing their daughter alive again. It's worth noting that both victims of the suspect were the same age and looked almost identical, like sisters. This led people to believe that the police had caught a serial predator. When questioned about the second woman, the suspect Adam unexpectedly agreed to cooperate in exchange for better living conditions. He wanted a private cell, a large TV, internet access, and specific meals. Law enforcement officials were outraged by his demands, but they relented to get the information. Adam began his story by talking about his difficult childhood, including how he was abused by his stepfather from the age of 5. He also described how he started torturing and killing animals from the age of 7, finding physical pleasure in these acts. When the conversation turned to Rory, Adam Strong described in detail how he had dismembered her, seemingly taking pleasure in it, but claiming he only did so because she had died from an overdose. However, the police did not believe him, and he was unable to convince them of his story. When questioned about Candace, who had disappeared 10 years prior, Strong was surprised the police knew about her. He tried to find out how they had discovered his secret, and when told about human flesh stuck to an old knife, he became somber and regretful for not taking better precautions to cover his tracks. Strong admitted to meeting Candace, but denied killing her. However, the evidence gathered did not support his claim. In an attempt to gain sympathy, he inadvertently incriminated himself. The police informed him that Rory was pregnant at the time of her death, which Strong vehemently denied. The detectives realized that Strong would argue endlessly to prove his point, so they decided to provoke him into revealing more than he intended. They insisted that the victim was pregnant, and Strong, trying to prove otherwise, described in detail how he had examined Rory's reproductive organs and felt a pulsation, leading the police to believe that she might have still been alive during the attack. Later, Strong tried to deny everything, but his statements had been recorded on camera and were presented in court. He refused to disclose what he had done with Candace's body, and her remains were never found. The detectives were unable to learn about any other possible victims. During one of the last interrogations, Strong callously stated that he would like his condolences to be passed on to Rory's parents. At the trial, his lawyers argued that Strong was mentally ill and unable to be held responsible for his actions. However, a psychiatric evaluation determined that despite certain disorders, Strong was aware of his actions and could be held legally accountable. The trial began in September 2020, 3 years after Rory's death and 12 years after Candace's disappearance. Strong was charged with 2 counts of murder and desecration of Rory's remains. Although he never admitted his guilt, the evidence and his confessions left no doubt about his involvement in the heinous crimes. 4 of Strong's former partners also testified, describing his cruelty and violent tendencies. According to the prosecution, Strong had lured both women to his home, promising them money for intimate services, and then killed them. Adam Strong brutally murdered his victim, subjecting her to a prolonged and agonizing ordeal. He likely killed her out of fear that she would report him to the authorities. On September 4th, his mobile phone signal was detected near the city harbor, where he had dumped the victim's torso, hoping the current would carry it away. In April 2021, Adam Strong was convicted of murdering Candace Fitzpatrick and Rory Hash, as well as desecrating Hash's remains. He received a life sentence without parole. However, Strong showed no remorse, stating in his final remarks that his prison cell was an improvement over his previous living conditions. 6 months into his sentence, Strong unexpectedly revealed the location of his first victim's remains. The police followed his directions, and after several months of searching, they discovered human bones. DNA testing confirmed that the skeleton belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, which was officially announced. Investigators believe that there may be additional victims in the Adam Strong case, possibly including at least one more woman. Notably, when Strong was initially arrested, his personal belongings were confiscated, including a chain with 3 rings. He later requested the items return, stating that the rings held sentimental value. Relatives of Rory and Candace later identified 2 of the rings as belonging to their dead daughters. However, the 3rd ring remains unidentified, sparking speculation about potential additional victims. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sidney Powell. Brenda Powell was born in 1969 in Saline, Agua, USA. She graduated from high school and then attended Akron University. After completing her studies, she began working as a pediatrician in the oncology department of her local children's hospital. For over 28 years, she has dedicated herself to helping sick children. Brenda oversees inpatient care and is known to her peers and hospital staff as a calm, quiet person who is exceptionally kind to both patients and their parents. In November 1996, Brenda, 27, married Stephen Powell and took his last name. They were introduced through a mutual friend who worked with her at the hospital. The couple enjoyed a happy life together for 23 years and welcomed 2 children. A daughter named Sydney and a son named Andrew. Since childhood, Sydney has been passionate about sports, especially football. Her family watched football together every Sunday, which helped strengthen their relationship. They also regularly visited the beach and Disneyland. As Sydney grew older, she and her mother, Brenda, began to spend more time together. While her father and brother watched football, they enjoyed shopping, which further strengthened their relationship. Sydney did well in high school, which helped her pass her exams and gain admission to Mount Union University, where she also received a scholarship. In college, she became friends with Lauren and a group of female students while living on campus. She participated in school events and was introduced to many different activities. Friends described Sydney as friendly and easygoing. Sydney's academic journey took an unexpected turn after her first year. Initially, everything seemed fine. She excelled in her classes and was praised by her teachers, ranking among the top students. Sydney began working part-time during the summer holidays to earn extra money. However, during her second year, Sydney faced significant challenges and decided to move off campus. Her friends were initially confused by this sudden decision, but later learned that Sydney was struggling academically. Her grades were dropping. Additionally, Sydney began sleeping excessively, often around 16 hours a day. Sydney's friends thought she could handle it all because she was a smart and hardworking student who had previously done well in school. Unfortunately, Sydney struggled and ended up failing 3 out of 4 exams. Due to strict regulations, she received a notice of expulsion from the university, which shocked everyone. Sydney was worried and shared her concerns with her friends. Fortunately, they informed her that she could reapply for admission. At the beginning of 2020, Sydney resumed her studies, attending classes and sorority meetings. She happily told her friends that she had been readmitted to the university and was doing well. In early February, Sydney was notified that she had to leave the school permanently and that her expulsion would remain in effect. She was offered assistance with moving and packing, and the school planned to notify her parents of her situation to help cover her expenses. However, Sydney told the school administration that her family already knew and did not need to be contacted. This was not true, and she was afraid that her parents would find out about her expulsion. During this time, she told her parents that she was doing well in school and had good grades, and that she had even won a scholarship. Her parents trusted her and had no reason to doubt her. After being evicted from campus, Sydney left but did not return home before the end of February. Instead, she stayed with friends in various hotels, paying in cash to avoid being tracked and to keep her situation at the university a secret. Although she worked part-time to support herself, her earnings were insufficient. Sydney constantly searched for online opportunities to make money but could not find a full-time job that would provide adequate support. She continued to live in hotels or with friends, afraid to go home. She cut back on everything and often did not eat enough. Eventually, she decided to return home, claiming that the campus was closed for renovations. She told her parents that she would stay with them while she went to college and still work. Her parents believed her and thought everything was fine. Sydney has been lying to her mother by saying that she is fine. Recently, Brenda has noticed some strange changes in her daughter's behavior. She discovers that Sydney is spending more time at home and not going to school, which raises concerns. This information later comes to light because Sydney's entire family uses the Life 360 app, a mobile phone location tracking app on a map for safety, allowing family members to know where each other are. On February 25, 2020, Brenda received a notification from the app that Sydney had stayed home all day instead of coming to college as scheduled. This worried Brenda, who was concerned that something was wrong. She contacted her daughter to find out what was going on. Sydney replied that she had a week off because her teacher was absent. She mentioned that students were given assignments to complete at home and were participating in remote learning. However, Brenda began to doubt Sydney's story. She told her daughter that her explanations did not seem right and reminded her of the importance of good grades to maintain her scholarship and graduate, which would affect her future job opportunities. She also emphasized the importance of attending school regularly. Sydney then reassured her mother that everything was fine and that she should not worry. The deception continued. On March 2nd, Sydney texted her mother, saying she was going to school and would be back by 2:30 p.m. Instead, she spent time with a friend, watching TV, while lying about her college situation. During this time, the parents noticed that something was wrong. Their daughter did not receive the scholarship, so her father, Stephen, had to pay her tuition. He tried to send money through the payment gateway, but could not complete the transaction because he had lost access to his account. Initially, he suspected a technical problem and decided to wait. However, when Stephen logged in on March 3rd while working at a metallurgical plant, he was still unable to complete the transaction. He then asked his daughter about the problem. Sydney reassured him not to worry and promised that she would look into the matter and resolve it. Stephen realized he could not delay any longer as the deadline was near, and he needed to pay for his daughter's studies quickly. He decided to contact the university himself to resolve the situation. When he called, the staff checked their records and informed him that Sydney was not listed as a student, meaning her access had been revoked. Stephen was shocked and thought there must be some mistake. He requested they verify the information again, and they confirmed that Sydney had indeed been expelled. However, the university staff would not disclose the date of her expulsion, citing confidentiality rules. Stephen used a tracking app to locate Sydney, who was supposed to be in class. Instead, he discovered she was at home while he was at work. He wanted to go home to talk to her, but he feared she might track his movements and run away. To avoid this, he left his phone at work and headed home. Before leaving, he called Sydney to gather information, but she avoided giving clear answers. During the conversation, she admitted that she was struggling at university and didn't like it there. However, she continued to lie, not confessing that she had been expelled a long time ago. Instead, she claimed she had just not been attending classes. Stephen was troubled by his daughter's situation. He believed she was capable and had a bright future ahead, but he worried that her lack of commitment to attending classes could hinder her progress. He wanted to talk to her about the issue so they could find a solution together. On his way to work, Stephen called Brenda to inform her about their daughter's learning difficulties. Although Brenda suspected something was wrong, she hoped it was not true. Throughout the call, Stephen was concerned about Sydney's situation. However, Brenda reassured him. With a background in psychology, she had a skill for helping others and wanted to use her experience to support their daughter. She promised Stephen that she would take time off work, go home, and have a calm and open discussion with Sydney to ensure that they could all make the best decision together. Brenda then tried to contact the school but was unsuccessful. She left a voicemail asking for a call back and then went home. When Brenda reached her private entrance, she told her husband what had happened and went inside. Meanwhile, teachers Michelle and John received Brenda's message and called her back within the hour. At approximately 12:36 p.m., Brenda answered the phone and spoke calmly to the teachers. Everything seemed normal until Brenda started screaming into the phone, followed by a series of noises. Michelle and John, who were listening on speakerphone, were confused about what was happening but sensed that something was wrong. Michelle and John were worried about what had happened and tried calling Brenda again, but she did not answer. After several tries, a woman finally picked up at 12:40 p.m., but it wasn't Brenda. The teachers recognized Sydney's voice and asked to speak to her mother, but the call suddenly ended. This situation made Michelle and John suspicious. They decided to contact the local police to check on Brenda. Police officer Kenneth Diss, a friend of Brenda's family, heard the call and was extremely concerned about the alarming situation. He personally called Stephen to ask what was going on at their house, but Stephen could not provide any information because he was not home. After thinking for a moment, Stephen recalled that Sydney and Brenda were supposed to be at home discussing their study problems. He suspected there might have been a conflict between his wife and daughter, but he couldn't imagine the reality of the situation. Stephen then rushed home and called his daughter, Sydney, to find out what was going on. Sydney reassures him that everything is fine, and the atmosphere seems calm. However, when Stephen tells her that the police are on their way, Sydney suddenly becomes hysterical. She begins to cry and reveals that a robber has broken into the house and attacked them. The call then ends abruptly. The police had already arrived at the house when Sydney dashed out, covered in blood, and screaming. She told the officers a shocking story about a robber who had broken in and attacked her mother. She said she heard glass breaking and that her mother told her to run, so she did. Sydney then hid in a courtyard, anxiously listening. She then found her mother lying in a pool of blood and she tried to help her, which is how she got blood on her. Inside the house, officers found Brenda lying face up in a room. She was badly injured, with a bloody cast iron skillet nearby and a kitchen knife on the floor. Despite the broken glass, officers began to doubt Sydney's story. Her story about a robber seemed very unbelievable. An ambulance arrived quickly and took Brenda to hospital, where she was taken to the intensive care unit. Sadly, 50-year-old Brenda Powell died shortly after arriving. Sydney was also examined by paramedics, but no serious injuries were found. She was sedated, her cuts were bandaged, and she was sent home. Forensic experts who examined Brenda's body were shocked by the brutality of the attack. She had suffered a severe blow to the back of the head, which caused her scalp to detach from her skull. Additionally, she had numerous stab wounds, estimated to be between 20 and 30, mostly concentrated on her neck. There were also multiple bruises and cuts on her arms, suggesting she had tried to defend herself. A preliminary review of the situation led police to believe that Sydney's account of events was fabricated. Although Sydney was covered in blood and had several smaller cuts on her arms, they were significantly less severe than her mother's injuries. It was evident that the robbery had been staged, as nothing was taken from the house. Sydney's actions raised several questions. After her mother told her to leave the house, why didn't she run to the neighbors for help or call 911? Instead, she waited in the yard and later went back into the house without any apparent fear. None of the neighbors reported seeing a robber. The blood found on Sydney was tested and matched her mother's, including traces on the broken glass. Police sent the knife, believed to be the murder weapon, and the frying pan for analysis. Brenda's blood was found on these items, and no fingerprints or other DNA were found at the scene. It appears that Sydney injured herself when she stabbed her mother. Sydney Powell was then taken to the police station for questioning. After the initial panic subsided, she refused to answer any questions. By this time, police investigating the attack had learned about recent events in Sydney's university life. They discovered that she had been expelled a month earlier and had lied to her family about her situation, staying with friends in hotels instead. She was so afraid of disappointing those around her that she had lied not only to her parents but also to her classmates and others. Police believed that Sydney was so afraid of telling the truth that she decided to kill her mother when her mother started to suspect something was wrong. Despite this, Sydney chose to remain silent. 19-year-old Sydney Powell was arrested and charged with murdering Brenda. She also faced charges for causing serious injury and for tampering with evidence to mislead the investigation. Due to her mental health issues, she was unable to admit or deny her guilt. Her lawyer argued that she was insane, stating that Sydney had struggled with serious mental health problems since childhood. At the time of the offense, Sydney may have been experiencing a mental health crisis that affected her perception of her actions. Sydney faced several mental health issues that may have contributed to the violent incident, which led police to request a psychiatric evaluation. During the examination, Sydney spoke about her memories of that day but could only recall bits and pieces. She remembered sitting in the basement, anxious about her parents coming home after her father found out about her struggles. She also remembers her mother coming home and their conversation starting, when her mother comforted her and asked what happened at school. She wished her mother would leave her alone. Then she heard the sound of glass breaking, and then she couldn't remember anything else about what happened. Sydney informed her doctor that she had been experiencing hallucinations since she was 11 years old. She had always been very anxious, responsible, and self-critical, setting extremely high academic standards for herself. At times her anxiety became so intense that it affected her ability to concentrate on tests, leading to multiple psychological evaluations. After extensive evaluation and discussion with Sydney, the psychiatrist diagnosed her with acute post-traumatic stress disorder, schizoaffective disorder, and depression. Sydney reported that she had recurring nightmares of her mother covered in blood. The lack of a clear motive for the murder led the psychiatrist to determine that Sydney was insane at the time of the incident. Another doctor who worked with Sydney for at least 3 to 6 months before the crime noted that her mental health had deteriorated significantly. She started losing touch with reality and began failing her exams, which ultimately led to her expulsion from university. Her condition was worsened by extreme self-criticism. She couldn't accept that she had failed. Sydney was also afraid to confess her struggles to her parents. However, the truth eventually came out, causing her immense stress. This culminated in a psychotic breakdown that resulted in her mother's murder. After her arrest, Sydney's bail was initially set at $250,000 but was later raised to $500,000. One of her relatives posted bail, allowing her to await her trial outside of custody. During this time, she received treatment for her mental health issues and felt significantly better by the time the hearings began. Sydney eventually regained her composure. After Sydney saw Brenda talking to college teachers, she knew that her mother would soon hear the truth from them. In a psychotic state, she attacked her mother. Teachers at the college heard the beginning of the attack. During the trial, her friends and relatives confirmed that they did not notice any significant changes in her behavior leading up to the crime. Although she was upset about being expelled, she was generally cheerful and sociable. The only noticeable difference was that she began sleeping more. The defense acknowledged that Sydney killed her mother but maintained that she was insane at the time. However, many experts disagreed with the psychiatrist's diagnosis. What everyone agreed on was that she suffered from borderline personality disorder, which is characterized by stubbornness, mood swings, and self-destructive behavior. In addition, signs of hallucinations were reported by Sydney to a psychiatrist when she was 11. There was no evidence in the medical records to support Sydney's claims, which undermined the defense's strategy. Several former friends mentioned that Sydney had exhibited unusual behavior even during her school years. One teacher recalled when Sydney was so nervous that she couldn't read anything on a test. However, teacher didn't realize that Sydney's anxiety could indicate mental health issues, so teacher didn't tell anyone. This type of anxiety continued into college, which may have contributed to Sydney failing her exams and eventually being expelled. While awaiting trial, Sydney lived with her grandmother and was prescribed medication to treat her mental health issues. The medication list and dosage were changed several times to find the most effective combination. Sydney's health improved significantly, and she shared any positive changes with her doctor. Her father also noticed the improvement and admitted that Sydney had a strong bond with her mother and loved her deeply. He believed that if Sydney had been in a healthy state of mind, she would never have harmed her mother. Throughout the trial, Sydney cried continuously and she expressed remorse for her actions. On September 18, 2023, the jury deliberated. Sydney Powell was found guilty on all counts. Sydney was sentenced to life in prison but will be eligible for parole after 15 years. Sydney and her attorney were unhappy with the sentence and planned to appeal the court's decision. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jordan Graham. Montana is the largest landlocked state in the United States, known for its stunning views of the Rocky Mountains and beautiful lakes. A major attraction in Montana is Glacier Park, a vibrant tourist destination, particularly during summer. The park features approximately 700 hiking trails for visitors to explore. Cody Johnson was born in San Jose, California. After his parents divorced, his mother, Sherry, raised him on her own. They always share a close. Eventually, Sherry decided to leave California and move to Montana with Cody. He is a kind, cheerful, and humorous person. He enjoys spending time outdoors, participating in activities like fishing and hiking, but his greatest passion is cars. He collected, repaired, and raced them with friends. After graduating, Cody found a job assembling custom cars, which he naturally enjoyed. His boss was his close friend Cameron, and Cody's career was thriving. However, he dreamed of settling down, meeting someone, and starting a family to fully establish himself in Montana. Cody's bachelor life was about to change. In 2011, he met and started dating Jordan Graham, a 21 years old. She was shy and reserved, only opening up when she felt comfortable. Jordan shared Cody's love for nature and travel. They spent a lot of time hiking together in beautiful Montana locations, especially enjoying visits to Glacier Park. Jordan loved children and often babysat for her friends, expressing her dream of having her own child. She came from a religious family with strict rules, including a ban on sex before marriage. Cody told friends that he really liked Jordan, and he began attending church with her friends and family. He shared that their relationship was growing stronger, and he was so in love that he told his mother he had found the person he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. In December 2012, Cody announced his engagement to Jordan on social media. Friends were thrilled about the engagement. 6 months later, on June 29, 2013, Cody and Jordan got married in an outdoor ceremony. They appeared to be the happiest and most perfect couple. They received many congratulatory speeches, making the event truly wonderful for them. After the long and significant day, they moved into their first home. Instead of going on a honeymoon, they decided to spend their free time working on the house. Cody took a week off from work and was expected to return on July 8, 2013. On Sunday, July 7th, Cody had plans to go kayaking with his father-in-law, Stephen. However, he later contacted Stephen to cancel, mentioning that Jordan had a surprise for him. He and Jordan attended an afternoon church service and then went for a walk by the lake. After the walk, Cody did not return to work, which was unusual for him. His boss, Cameron, became worried and decided to visit his home. Finding no one there and no signs of a break-in, Cameron checked the garage for Cody's car and found his phone, which he usually kept with him. Cameron then reported Cody missing to the police. The detectives first needed a statement from Cody's wife, Jordan. She explained that on their way back from Dairy Queen, Cody received a call and talked for about 30 minutes. She didn't know who called, but Cody appeared clearly agitated by the end of the conversation. When they arrived at Jordan's house, she realized her phone was low on battery and she had left her charger at work. She got back in her car and went to work, leaving Cody in the garage. Later, she received a text from Cody saying he was going for a ride with someone. When she returned home after work, she found her husband was not home. He had gone out in a dark-colored car with Washington state plates. This is nothing unusual, because Cody loved cars and often went to races with new friends, sometimes late at night. She did not report him missing for fear that if he returned, he would realize she had overreacted. Cody and Jordan's group of friends quickly set out to access Cody's social media accounts, hoping to find information about his whereabouts. They obtained a call log and learned that he received a call from a Washington number around the time Jordan mentioned. Since Jordan recalled seeing a car with Washington plates, this was already a lead. The police traced the plate to a man named Jose. Upon questioning, Jose explained that he had called Cody about some tools he had borrowed. The conversation was ordinary, and Jose couldn't recall anything significant related to Cody at that time. Jose is no longer a suspect because he has an alibi, although the police found it odd due to the Washington plates on the car. It's been 3 days since Cody was last seen and police still have no more leads. The search for he intensified. Everyone joined the search day and night. Volunteers joined in, and his family and friends did everything they to find him. They visited the police station to answer various questions, but the responses often didn't align. Jordan was mistaken in her testimony when talking about her time and actions. Jordan explained that Cody left without telling her where he was going or who he was with. Then, she suddenly mentioned receiving a message from he, saying he needed to go for a ride with friends. She also noted that whenever Cody's friends visited, he always took them to Glacier Park for a trip. The investigator highlighted that her story about her husband's disappearance differed from the police's information and urged her to be completely honest. One day, Jordan and her mother went to the police station and showed them an email she had received that morning from a stranger named Tony. The email briefly stated that Tony wanted Jordan to know that there was no need to look for Cody anymore because he was gone. They should stop looking. The email also mentioned that he had gone hiking with friends that night and had fallen off a cliff. Everyone was shocked and assumed that he was dead. It was discovered that Jordan knew Tony. He was a co-worker of Cody's. The police tracked down Tony and asked him to testify. Tony explained that he hadn't seen Cody for some time and hadn't been in contact because Cody was busy preparing for his wedding. He had not used his email recently. He provided all of his phone and computer data to the investigation, and the police concluded that Tony was not involved. Using the details from the email, Jordan organized his own search group and ventured into the rugged and winding terrain. Due to the park's vast size, everyone was aware that the search might drag on for weeks. The following day, the search continued. Jordan led the team in a specific direction, as if she was on a mission to reach a particular location. They drove through many roads and cliffs, any of which could have been Cody's path. Jordan told her friends she wanted to find a certain place Cody had dreamed of visiting. Jordan suddenly stopped the car and jumped out near the loop trail. Next to the trail was a steep slope filled with rocks and tree roots, appearing very dangerous. Undeterred, Jordan climbed over the fence and made her way to the edge. She looked down and shouted to the others that she saw someone at the bottom of the ravine. She claimed it was Cody and called the others over. The search party contacted the park rangers, but since it was already getting dark and too risky to descend, the search was postponed until morning. At 8 a.m. on July 12th, the search for Cody came to a tragic end. Rescuers used ropes tied to trees to descend. Then, they discovered a blue sneaker, identical to the one Cody wore on the day he disappeared. At the bottom, they found Cody face down in the shallow water near the waterfall. Beside him lay a small piece of black cloth, and he was missing his wedding ring. As news spread, friends and family wondered why Cody was at that location at night. Cody's friend, Eddie, mentioned that while Cody enjoyed sightseeing and long walks, he never ventured off the trail, especially in the dark, and was afraid of heights. Cody always hikes on safely fenced trails in lower areas. He once confided to a friend that his fear of heights was so severe that he couldn't even climb a ladder to change a light bulb at his mother's house. Shortly after Cody was found, Jordan posted a wedding photo on Instagram. She said she missed Cody very much, saying that not a day went by without her thinking about him. He was in her heart forever and that she knew he was in a better place now, watching over her as her angel. She said she loved him with all her heart and soul, and hoped to see him again one day. 2 weeks later, the police were still searching for answers about the mysterious email. During the investigation, Cody was buried. At his funeral, Jordan spent the entire time staring at her phone, showing no emotion. Maybe this is how she gets over her pain, but her friend, Kimberly, who witnessed the wedding, thought the behavior was too strange. Kimberly went to the police station to provide information for the investigation. She told the officer that she had been receiving messages from Jordan a few weeks before and following Cody and Jordan's wedding. She recounted conversations with Jordan before the wedding, mentioning that Jordan seemed more excited about the wedding itself than about Cody's feelings. It seemed that Jordan enjoyed the prospect of being a bride more than the reality of being a wife. Friends noticed that Cody seemed more in love with Jordan than she was with him. Kimberly recalled Jordan questioning whether marrying Cody was the right choice. Jordan was very anxious about the wedding night and wondered if she was making a mistake by getting married. The night after the wedding, Jordan messaged she, expressed uncertainty about everything that happened on the wedding night, and mentioned that a lot had happened. When she wanted to hear more details about what happened, Jordan insisted that it was a conversation best had in person rather than over the phone. During several days of texting, Jordan shared with Kimberly that she had told Cody she was on her period to avoid having sex. But they were supposed to discuss it today. Jordan later mentioned that if her husband forced her to do something, she might have a mental breakdown. On the evening of July 7th, after having dinner with friends, Kimberly received another message from Jordan. In it, Jordan said stating that she wanted to talk to Cody about her true feelings. Kimberly wished them understanding and resolution. Later, at 9 p.m., Jordan appeared at Kimberly's door, saying the conversation hadn't gone well. Cody had gotten angry, and she had left to see her brother. From all this, it seems that from the very beginning, Jordan knew where to find Cody. Her testimony about him wanting to go to Glacier Park that day, and her silence about his disappearance seemed suspicious. Kimberly had a gut feeling that Jordan was involved in Cody's death. Detectives were already skeptical of Jordan's story, given the numerous inconsistencies in her account. Their suspicions grew when Kimberly provided evidence in the form of text messages. Then, the police discovered the IP address of the email, which revealed that it was created and sent from Jordan's father's house. This contradicted Jordan's claim that Cody had left that night and they spent it apart. Recordings of phone conversations revealed that Jordan was lying, as both phones and their owners were in Glacier Park at 9:15 p.m. Using this time frame, police obtained CCTV footage from the park's entrance, which showed Cody's car and both Cody and Jordan inside. Jordan was then asked to come to the police station and tell the truth about what happened that night. During questioning, Jordan was forced to recount what happened on the day of the incident. She revealed that she had opened up to Cody about her feelings, which led to a heated argument. Cody suggested that if she truly felt this way, they should consider annulling their marriage. However, Jordan was hesitant, fearing the potential damage to her reputation that would come with getting divorced just 8 days after their wedding. Then, they got into their car and drove to a national park, and they continued their argument. At one point, Jordan mentioned something about a blindfold. As they walked across a bridge and climbed over a fence, their argument escalated. Jordan suggested that they should wait a bit before getting married, but Cody disagreed. They continued to argue. Eventually, Cody tried to grab she. However, she said the incident that followed was a result of anger. Despite her assertion that it was an accident, but the policeman did not believe it. Instead of running for help, Jordan attempted to forge an email on her father's computer. The question remains as to why Cody the need to climb over the edge of the cliff, especially if he was afraid of heights. Even for those who aren't afraid of heights, climbing a 300-foot cliff in the dark and blindfolded is a huge challenge. According to recent information, Jordan was charged with the murder of Cody Johnson just 8 days after their wedding. She will be released, but placed under house arrest and must undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Friends of Cody believe that everything is progressing well and that justice will soon be served. Jordan was initially arrested and charged with second-degree murder and perjury. But these charges were later increased. The prosecutor's office first charged Jordan with second-degree murder for allegedly pushing her husband, Cody, off a cliff in Glacier National Park. However, her charges were later upgraded to first-degree murder. Some of Jordan's friends, who have known her since childhood, mentioned that she was crying hysterically before reaching the altar and seemed to have no joy about getting married. Many people noticed her strange behavior, observing that she acted as if nothing had happened, showing no emotion. When Jordan's trial began, her defense team argued for a second-degree murder conviction, claiming it was an accident during a heated argument. However, the prosecution insisted it was more than an accident. Evidence suggested that Jordan told Cody she had a surprise for him, and a bandage-like item was found near the body, indicating a deliberate act. Additionally, phone calls, text messages, a fake email, her failure to notify anyone of her husband's disappearance, and her lack of emotion after the incident strengthened the prosecution's case, suggesting that Jordan may have planned the murder and intended to blame someone else. On the second day of the hearing, prosecutors gathered evidence that undermined Jordan's defense strategy. During the trial, a video of the police interrogations was shown, revealing to the jury how she lied to the police sergeant. She also deceived her own sixth brother, who testified that during the search, he cried and begged her to tell the truth, but she lied again. On December 13, 2013, just 4 days after the trial began, Jordan's defense announced that she entered the courthouse as a free woman and left in handcuffs. She surprised everyone by changing her plea to second-degree murder. Jordan stood before the judge and admitted the truth about what happened in Glacier National Park. She said at the time, she wasn't considering the consequences and recklessly pushed Cody. When she pleaded guilty, Cody's mother began to cry. Contrary, her parents remained silent throughout the trial and left the courthouse quietly at the end, leaving their daughter in the custody of the U.S. Marshals. As a result of her guilty plea, Jordan Graham was sentenced to 30 years in prison without the possibility of parole. In exchange, prosecutors dropped the first-degree murder charge and 1 count of perjury. Jordan filed an appeal to withdraw her guilty plea on March 26, 2014, but the appeal was denied. After everything ended, Cody's friends tried to make sense of what truly happened. They insisted that, despite any anger or frustration Cody felt towards Jordan, but he loved her. He would be willing to end the marriage if it would make Jordan happy. No one could figure out why Jordan killed her husband. She came from a religious family with strict rules, and perhaps in her youth, she made some mistakes and feared confessing to her husband. Alternatively, due to her parental upbringing, she may not be ready for a marital relationship, leading to psychological trauma and shyness towards men. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Dickinson family. From the outside, the Dickinson family appeared perfect. They had everything needed for happiness, a loving mother and a devoted father who was willing to do anything for his family's well-being. Although they lived together in a small unit, they harbored many dark secrets that would surprise an outsider. For years, the Dickinson family faced deep-rooted issues that ultimately resulted in brutal murders. This tragic event took place in September 2021. One significant factor that contributed to this horrific outcome was depression, which can be devastating. Today, we will share one of the most heartbreaking stories from the criminal world. Lauren Dickinson, who lived in South Africa. She had a difficult childhood that made it hard for her to connect with teachers and other children. As a result, she often felt isolated and was frequently excluded from holidays and birthday celebrations. This experience contributed to mental health issues that began during her teenage years. Lauren is very anxious and struggles to control her emotions, always seeing threats in everyday situations. Despite her difficulties, she has had a passion for medicine since she was a child. After finishing school, she went to university and eventually became a general practitioner. In the following years, while working, Lauren met Graham, an orthopedic doctor, and they began dating. Despite their different medical specializations, they quickly developed a close bond and fell in love. Graham was outgoing and sociable, which complemented Lauren's more reserved nature. Their relationship seemed harmonious as they balanced each other's weaknesses. With Graham's influence, Lauren became more cheerful and open. They got married in May 2006. At that time, they lived in Pretoria, South Africa, where they built a house on nearly a hectare of land. The house had 4 bedrooms, a gym, a swimming pool. As they started their married life, Lauren shifted her career focus to gynecology and neurological diseases. However, almost from the beginning of her attempts to get pregnant, she decided to put her career on hold to have children. In 2012, Lauren returned to work at the medical center, but she was no longer a practicing physician. Instead, she became a part-time manager and her husband's assistant. The couple faced challenges conceiving due to health issues. Despite these difficulties, they were eager to have children. In 2013, they sought help from fertility specialists. After successful treatment, they welcomed a baby girl named Sarah, but she was born prematurely at 18 weeks. Sadly, Sarah did not survive. The loss was a shock to Lauren, who grieved every day for the next 2 months. The couple continued to consult with fertility specialists but continued to face challenges conceiving. Lauren underwent 17 rounds of IVF, often with low success rates. They eventually decided to use donor eggs and their first daughter, Leanne, was born. The family was very anxious during the pregnancy. Lauren feared another negative outcome and the possibility of losing the baby again. After Leanne was born, Lauren suffered from mental health issues. In 2015, doctors diagnosed her with anxiety, postpartum depression, and major depressive disorder when Leanne was just 18 months old. In response to the situation, Graham took a leave of absence to care for their daughter, and other family members stepped in to help. Following the doctor's advice, Lauren managed her illness with medication. Despite the challenges, the couple remained hopeful about having a second child, and after a few years, Lauren became pregnant again. An ultrasound revealed that she was expecting twins, which excited the parents as their family was set to grow. However, during the examination, they learned that one of the girls had a cleft palate, which caused Lauren significant anxiety. Fortunately, it was later discovered that the condition was not as serious as initially thought, which brought relief to Lauren's family. In 2018, twins Maya and Carla were born earlier than expected when they were in their 5th month. A successful surgery to correct the birth defect was performed. The family handled the ordeal well. After the surgery, Lauren and Graham decided to hire a nanny to help care for the family. The issues surrounding the birth left Lauren feeling anxious and compounded by panic attacks. Her husband Graham described her as an extremely anxious mother, constantly worrying about their children. Lauren was overprotective, often watching their every move, which irritated the kids. Despite these challenges, they managed to overcome many of the difficulties. The Dickinson family was relatively well off, allowing them to hire a maid, gardener, and nanny to help ease the stress on Lauren, who struggled with her mental health. By 2020, the Dickinson family had sold their house and land and moved abroad. They chose to rent a comfortable apartment. This new living situation has significantly improved their family relationships. For the first time in 10 years, Lauren stopped taking antidepressants. By March 2021, she was off all medications and had good mental health. This positive change inspired her to start doing CrossFit at least 3 times a week to stay in shape. In addition, she overcame her eating disorder. This change gave her a more positive outlook on life. Graham noticed positive changes in Lauren and was relieved that she seemed to have overcome her previous health problems. However, their happiness did not last long. By June 2021, Lauren's depression had returned. As a result, Lauren decided to see her psychiatrist again, who prescribed her antidepressants after she described feeling depressed and isolated. The Dickinson family was in a difficult situation. Graham was often home because he did not work, and the children became very attached to him, always wanting him around. As a result, Lauren felt left out and she often argued with her children, who preferred to be with their father. Although they appeared to be a happy family on the surface, things were actually very tense and could explode at any moment. In July 2021, South Africa experienced a series of riots that heightened Lauren's anxiety. The violent protests triggered panic within her family, prompting them to quickly decide to move to New Zealand, which they saw as a quieter and safer place. This move was also strategic, as Graham's parents lived there. However, their hopes were met with numerous challenges. Immigrating under such circumstances carried the risk of being denied a residence permit due to chronic illness or health conditions. To hide her struggles from the authorities, Lauren stopped taking her antidepressants shortly before the move. Her psychiatrist had told her that she was stable and no longer needed medication. Nevertheless, the pressure of the emigration process caused Lauren significant stress, worsened by her insomnia. She was only getting 2 hours of sleep each night because of the increased workload. Before the move, she began taking another medication in August 2021. The Dickinson family left South Africa on August 2nd. Lauren later described the trip as one of the most difficult times of her life, filled with anxiety about their future in New Zealand. Upon arriving in New Zealand, they settled in Timaru, a quiet town of about 30,000. The family's struggles continued. Their living conditions in New Zealand were not much better than in South Africa, with frequent power outages. In addition, Graham had to return to work earlier than expected, adding to the Dickinson family's stress. Graham started working at a hospital in Timaru and started his shift. Lauren hoped that they would have more time to deal with the challenges of moving house and adjusting to a new. Lauren felt overwhelmed with family issues and was left to care for 3 young children on her own without any support. On the appointed day, the Dickinson family went to the immigration office and were selected as potential citizens, while many other families faced rejection. Their application was accepted and they were told to wait for a response. The couple then went to a local Christian school to enroll their child in kindergarten. Graham noticed that during this time, Lauren seemed particularly sad, as if a dark cloud was hanging over her. She seemed far from the cheerful person who shared her life on social media. Even the smallest setback would send her spiraling deeper into depression. During this challenging period, Lauren kept in touch with her new friend Letitia through social media. She attempted to call Letitia, who had recently moved, to invite her to dinner, but her messages went unanswered. Meanwhile, Lauren and her spouse were looking for a rental property, but all the houses within their budget were in poor condition. They were temporarily staying in a house provided by the hospital, which only added to Lauren's stress as she was already feeling overwhelmed. However, on the night of September 14, 2021, Lauren had trouble sleeping. The next day, she had to take Maya and Carla to kindergarten and take Leanne to school. The morning was lively as the children, excited about their early rise and packing, chose their outfits without noticing their Lauren's fatigue. After dropping them off at school, Lauren returned home and lay down to rest. At 10:47 a.m., she received a photo from her kindergarten teacher showing her twins eating lunch at their table. Then Lauren cleaned the house, organizing her belongings because her family had just moved here. After running errands all day, Lauren picked up the girls from daycare and school around 3 p.m. and took them to the playground. Later, at home, Carla threw a tantrum because she missed their dad, who was at work. The other twin, Maya, had recently fallen out of bed and hurt her stitches. The girls cried so much that Lauren felt like a bad mother, trying to comfort them when they ignored her attempts to comfort them. Lauren cooked chicken nuggets for the children, but they were not satisfied with the meal. This led to a breaking point for her. Feeling overwhelmed, Lauren bathed the children and put them to bed around 6 p.m. Although she received several messages from friends in South Africa, she did not have time to reply to all of them. Graham returned home from work, had a quick dinner, and then left for an important meeting at 7 p.m. While he was away, chaos erupted in the house. About 20 minutes after he left, the children began to scream. In an attempt to calm them down, Lauren went to the garage to get some zip ties. Lauren told the children they were going to weave a necklace and placed the zip ties around their necks. No idea what was going on and were happily playing along. However, Leanne was angry with her mother and criticized what she was doing. For Leanne, it was not a game. In a fit of rage, Lauren began suffocating her children with pillows and blankets. She said that she was very sick and would soon die, and that she was killing her children because she was afraid that no one would take care of them. After Lauren believed the children were dead, she attempted to end your life. Lauren cut herself with a knife, but the blade was too dull to cut deeply. Ultimately, she resorted to pills, consuming several large doses of various medications. But these were not enough to end her life. In a moment of confusion, Lauren collapsed on the kitchen floor, lost in her thoughts about her actions. At that moment, Graham came home. He noticed something was wrong with her and asked if she was okay, but she responded in a way he couldn't understand. Sensing something was very wrong, he rushed upstairs to check on the kids. Going up to the room, he hoped everything was okay, but instead, he found the lifeless bodies of his children on the bed. The horrifying reality unfolded before his eyes. In desperation, he sought help. With the help of colleagues at a nearby hospital, he ran out into the street to meet one of them. As he closed the door behind him, the last thing he saw was Lauren lying on the floor with her eyes closed. He didn't know if she was alive, his only concern was his daughters. So he didn't check on Lauren. A friend at the hospital tried to revive the children, but their efforts were in vain. Around 9:40 p.m., neighbors heard a loud noise, which turned out to be a door slamming as Graham rushed outside. Soon after, they heard sobbing and screaming coming from the house. Graham approached the house and admitted that everything was his fault. He was distressed about leaving the children with their mother, who was not mentally stable. Neighbors called emergency services, and the police and ambulance arrived around 10 p.m. Officers discovered the bodies of the murdered children in the house. The twins, Maya and Carla, aged 2, and their 6-year-old, Leanne, had been killed. In the kitchen, police found Lauren alive and conscious. She answered their questions but spoke very softly. The Lauren appeared to be in shock. The police discovered shallow cuts on her hands and forearms. When asked if she had used any illegal drugs that evening, she denied it. Later, police found 9 medication bottles in her trash, along with a package containing hundreds of cable ties. A toxicological examination revealed that her blood did not contain any illegal drugs or alcohol, but it did show high levels of antidepressants, sedatives, and other medications. 40-year-old Lauren was promptly arrested and taken to the hospital for help. The brutal murders of the Dickinson family shocked the local community and then spread throughout New Zealand and South Africa. The nanny who worked for the family was speechless when she heard the news. She struggled to accept that it was true. In an interview, the nanny described Lauren, Graham, and their children as an ideal family, saying that she had never witnessed any arguments or conflicts within their household. The nanny firmly believed that Lauren loved her children deeply. She last saw the children in June 2021, when the Dickinson family was excited about moving to New Zealand. After Lauren was taken into custody, Graham had to return to South Africa because his visa was expiring in December 2021. He later returned to participate in the trial. He communicated with Lauren and found it hard to believe that she had harmed the children. The day after her arrest, Lauren woke up in the hospital. She was in disbelief about her situation and was even more shocked, and the police entered her room and accused her of killing 3 girls. On September 18th, Lauren Dickinson was officially charged with triple murder. Lauren admitted to the crime but stated that she did not want to harm her children. She explained that her actions stemmed from her mental instability and the overwhelming challenges she faced as a mother. Lauren expressed feelings of inadequacy in her parenting, struggling to manage her children, who were often screaming. Eventually, the stress became unbearable for her. She recounted how she killed her children, first Carla, then Leanne, and finally Maya, using pillows and blankets to suffocate them. Although Lauren denied experiencing auditory or visual hallucinations, her lawyer requested a psychiatric evaluation following the preliminary court hearing. During this time, Lauren refused to eat and lost weight, dropping to 47 kilograms. Her physical and mental health issues delayed the case for a month, leading to the rescheduling of the hearing for July 2023, nearly 2 years after the tragic events. In court, Lauren's lawyers sought to focus on her mental health struggles as part of their defense strategy. New Zealand law is very lenient towards those who commit crimes against children, especially in cases of manslaughter, where the offender can receive a suspended sentence. It was important for the defense to show that Lauren's actions were a response to extreme stress, showing that she considered killing her child a form of self-defense. The trial began on July 17, 2023, and lasted 4 weeks. Attorneys have said that Lauren had suffered from years of health problems and struggled with depression. Her mental health struggles led her to consider killing her daughter as a way to deliverance. Tensions had recently escalated between Lauren and her children. They often disobeyed her, which led her to resort to physical punishment and consider sedatives. During the trial, Graham revealed that Lauren had raised concerns about the children's safety on 3 separate occasions, but he had not taken them seriously. Each time he left the house, he felt remorse. In May 2019, Lauren expressed a desire to smother their daughters with pillows. In July 2011, she mentioned wanting to cut their femoral arteries in the bathroom. Despite these alarming statements, they were not considered serious at the time. Lauren has a hard time managing her spoiled twins, expressing her frustration by saying, "Children drive she crazy. They are wild, brazen, and disobedient. She tired of them. She wish I could start over and make different choices." Lauren had to face many difficulties to become a parent, making it difficult for others to believe that she could hurt the children. During the trial, Graham described her difficulties in raising her children. He rarely saw her show affection to her children, and they did not seem to seek her out. This became especially evident when he was home more often and the children clung to him, leaving Lauren without the opportunity to play with them. He sensed something was wrong, but attributed it to her withdrawn personality and inability to participate in fun activities. Graham mentioned that New Zealand did not meet Lauren's expectations. The new country felt completely different from what she had envisioned. This led to a significant cultural shock from everything she encountered. Graham expressed forgiveness towards his wife, believing she was overwhelmed by the challenges she faced. He urged others to forgive her and pray for Lauren. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office aimed to demonstrate that the triple murder was premeditated. They presented evidence showing that the actions were methodical and intentional, including search engine queries. Lauren had repeatedly searched for lethal doses of various medications for children and methods of strangulation. Additionally, she had confided her disturbing plans to family members on several occasions. The prosecutor argued that the Lauren was frustrated and angry with her children because she felt unable to manage them and was resentful towards them, believing that the girls negatively impacted her relationship with her husband. Psychiatrists confirmed that the Lauren was likely in an unstable mental state at the time of the crime. Experts noted that Lauren was experiencing significant anxiety during this period. On August 14, 2013, the jury began reviewing the evidence in the case, which included hundreds of pages of research reports and documents from police and experts. After initial deliberations, the jury was unable to reach a consensus on Lauren's guilt. They returned to the office to review detailed police footage of the victim's parents, which took more than 15 hours and lasted 2 days. On August 16, after a hearing at Christchurch, Lauren's attorney, and Tui, said the best place for Lauren to serve her sentence was in hospital, a placement that all 3 mental health professionals who evaluated her agreed with. Lauren Dickinson will be detained at hospital pending assessment before a sentencing date is finalized. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Morrissey. Michael was born in Pennsylvania in 1953. He later moved to Williamsport, Maryland. Overall, his childhood was quite normal. After graduating from high school, he went to college and quickly married his girlfriend, whom he had loved for several years. The feeling was mutual, so she readily agreed. Michael is a person who has tried his best to achieve success in his career, he becoming a well-known insurance agent in the city for some time. Though he was good at it, he eventually switched to pharmaceuticals, where his career truly flourished as a pharmaceutical representative. He started his own business and provided his family with a wonderful life. He earned well, and the family wanted for nothing. Unfortunately, his happy married life did not last long. For years after the birth of their children, Michael and his wife's relationship became cold, so they decided to divorce. Despite the divorce, but he and his wife remain on good terms, and the children still visit him regularly. The son and daughter later recalled that even during the divorce proceedings, they never saw their parents argue. Their relationship remained peaceful and respectful, even as they decided to end their marriage. A few years later, Michael moved to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, to start a new life. He plans to continue his business there until he retires. As a single man, Michael enjoyed his freedom and owned a large, beautiful house by the river. He developed an interest in art and began collecting valuable pieces. Although he didn't aim for world-class masterpieces, he has gathered a fascinating collection that he is very proud of. Michael remained a bachelor for a long time until 2012, when he met a 28-year-old single mother named Jennifer Morrissey. They quickly fell in love and moved into a more intimate relationship. The romance was intense and passionate. Soon, Michael invited Jennifer on a vacation to the Caribbean islands. On the trip, he brought 2 jet skis and 2 ATVs so that both could participate in the activities. He was deeply infatuated with Jennifer, and his relatives were amazed at how much he had changed. He even got his first tattoo in his life, dedicated to Jennifer. In 2015, after they had been dating for 3 years, Michael invited Jennifer to move into his house, and she agreed. He gave her everything, including a comfortable life. Jennifer's stepchild even has his own room. However, the idyll lasted until August 8th of that year, when Michael was found dead in his house. By this time, his relationship with Jennifer had been going on for 3 years, and they were planning a wedding. Earlier, colleagues found Michael lifeless in his home. They initially thought he might have died from a heart attack. When the rescue team arrived, they discovered he sitting in a chair with his head tilted back. From behind, he appeared to be sleeping, but closer inspection revealed a pool of blood beneath him, with blood streaks around his mouth, nose, and chest. It became clear that he had not died from a heart attack but from gunshot wounds to the face. The wound between his eyes suggested that it was either murder or intentionally ended his life. Forensic experts began analyzing the scene and quickly ruled out intentionally ended his life. If he had shot himself, the gun would have fallen to the floor or at his feet, but the gun was missing. This indicated someone else was present at the time of his death, who pulled the trigger. Forensic experts expanded the search area and examined the living room. A .380 caliber cartridge case was found about 10 meters from Michael. There were no signs of a struggle inside the house, perhaps because the killer suddenly attacked him and acted abruptly. In addition, the watch, a laptop, and a cell phone of Michael's were also lost, indicating a robbery. It appears he witnessed a break-in, prompting the attacker to kill him to silence him. Further clues were found in Michael's bedroom. Investigators learned that he owned 2 registered guns. However, only one gun was found, and the holster for his Smith & Wesson .38 was empty. It was confirmed that he was shot with this missing gun. He had kept the gun for self-defense, indicating the perpetrator likely knew its location. There were no signs of a struggle, no injuries on Michael. This suggests the criminal knew the house, the location of the weapon, and how to escape unnoticed. As a result, investigators began testing people who had close contact with Michael to identify the suspect. The robbery theory quickly to unravel. Although Michael's pockets were empty, along with his cell phone, laptop, and watch were all lost, but other valuable objects remained intact. These valuable objects are highly visible, include his art collection, which featured some valuable pieces. Notably, each painting in his collection was lit up. The intruder didn't come to the house to rob, but specifically to kill. Several items were taken to create a fake scene of a robbery, in order to mislead the investigation. One important piece of information is the disappearance of information storage devices, such as mobile phones and laptops, likely containing important, suggesting this was not accidental. The house was not broken into, the doors and windows are still intact. This suggests that either the perpetrator had access to the house or Michael let them in, likely because he trusted them. Upon investigating his recent life, the police found he had no known enemies. He had been in a long-term relationship with a woman named Jennifer Morrissey, who was 33 years old. Some neighbors noted that she was the fiancée of he. However, she had vanished without a trace, which seemed very suspicious. Neighbors described Jennifer as a rather private person who did not like to talk about herself or her past. It was known that she had conflicts with her mother. Jennifer recounted her difficult childhood living in her mother's house, and she had been abused a lot. She accused 2 men of repeatedly raping her during her teenage years. However, her mother did not believe it. So, she eventually dropped out of school and left home. She recalls this period as a difficult one, and she suffered from severe depression. After leaving home, Jennifer had to support herself, so she found work as a mechanic. She also bought a sporty motorcycle and enjoyed riding around the city in her free time. On social media, she often boasted about speeding on night roads, indicating her love for danger. She also was a thrill seeker and expressed some of her ideals through her tattoos, which included several words across her chest and biceps, as well as a grinning skull on her arm. Jennifer became a mother at 20. The child's biological father quickly abandoned them, so she worked hard to secure her child's future. Besides her mechanic job, she also worked as a dancer at a nightclub in Pennsylvania. It was there in 2012 that she met Michael McNew, a 59-year-old regular at the club. During one visit, they struck up a conversation, and he invited her to dinner. Jennifer agreed to the date on the condition that he pay her $1,200 electricity bill. They began frequently visiting upscale restaurants and expensive places. Michael showered her with lavish gifts, including jewelry, a motorcycle, and a car, and he also took her on trips. Jennifer started referring to him as her sugar daddy, and he was happy to support a beautiful young woman. Jennifer's life is quite difficult, so it's not surprising that she saw Michael as a chance to improve things she had been unable to for years. She felt that Michael not only brought her the opportunity to get rich, but also brought her the respect and understanding she had never experienced in her life. They started dating in 2015, and their relationship deepened when they moved in together. Initially, their relationship seemed strong, but over time, it began to decline. Neighbors reported a major conflict happened a few months before Michael passed away. Some witnessed an intense argument, after which Michael and Jennifer allegedly separated. However, they continued living together even though their relationship has deteriorated greatly. Jennifer vanished shortly after the tragedy, and it appeared intentional. At that time, Jennifer was not considered a suspect. The police chose to reach out to Michael's children. They couldn't accept that their father had passed away. As soon as they learned what had happened to their father, they immediately packed their things. Michael's son, Patrick, traveled from Pittsburgh, while his sister and their mother traveled from Maryland. They all met and headed to Michael's home. Patrick told investigators that he never took his father's relationship with stripper Jennifer seriously. He thought Jennifer was too rude, brazen, and greedy, so he didn't want his father to have a long-term relationship with her. Michael's relatives and many friends tried to persuade him to end the relationship, for fear she might endanger. In June 2016, Michael's daughter, Katie, got married. She told her father that she did not want Jennifer to attend her upcoming wedding. Michael decided to skip this event, so the wedding happened without the bride's father. Despite his relatives' objections, Michael continued to date Jennifer. Michael even made her the beneficiary of 2 life insurance policies worth about $500,000. By then, everyone knew Jennifer was frequently using illegal substances, exploiting Michael, and possibly having an affair. She severely damaged the relationship between Michael and Patrick, leading to frequent conflicts between them. Many believe that she did this on purpose so that she could gain access to all of Michael's assets, a wealthy man. However, in 2017, new issues emerged when she started distancing herself from he. She would leave without notice, came home late at night and just went to sleep without explaining anything. It was obvious that she was not really interested in the relationship anymore. During this time, she began using more illegal substances during this time, resulting in a serious addiction. She was arrested several times. Twice for substance abuse and once for causing an accident. A year before the tragic incident, Jennifer had cut off a cyclist with her car. Despite these issues, Michael stood by her. He helped pay all the fines and legal costs, making monthly payments for 2 cases filed against her, amounting to about $4,000 in total. According to Michael's children, shortly before his death, he mentioned his intention to break up with Jennifer and cancel their wedding plans. For Jennifer, this means she will lose everything, including a life of luxury that he has given her. She had to manage on her own and didn't have much money. She would also lose the large house and access to all the luxuries he had provided. The children of Michael, Patrick, and Katie believed that money was the motive for the murder. Jennifer simply lost control of herself as she found herself facing the possibility of losing everything. Michael had died 24 to 48 hours before his colleagues found him. The cause of his death was a gunshot to the face, fired at very close range. The bullet impacted the facial bone, fragmented, and split into 2 parts. One of them reached the brain, causing instant death. The police had to mobilize all resources and seize every opportunity to capture Jennifer and interrogate her, as she was the prime suspect. She was known to be on probation due to an accident. The police hoped she would come to the department to check in with the inspector, and as they anticipated, she did. On August 10, For days after Michael's death, Jennifer unexpectedly arrived at the police station to pay court costs. She also reported to the police that she had seen on the news that her lover, Michael, had been killed, which surprised her greatly. The dispatcher then informed the detectives leading the investigation about this. It seemed odd because news of the crime had appeared on TV and social media almost immediately after the murder. Why did Jennifer wait for days to contact the police? The detectives reached out to Jennifer and arranged to meet her at the station the next day. They didn't reveal that she was a suspect in the murder, but said they wanted to ask a few questions about a T-shirt. Meanwhile, they requested a warrant to examine her communications. However, Jennifer sensed something was amiss and didn't show up for the meet. Instead, she disappeared for several days. From experience, the detectives knew that this behavior was typical of criminals who are buying time. During such periods, they often fabricate an alibi or attempt to hide. Meanwhile, the police continued gathering evidence against Jennifer's. To learn more, the investigators spoke to multiple friends of Michael. One friend revealed that shortly before the crime, Michael had called him, expressing fear for life. Michael had discovered the identity of Jennifer's boyfriend, a man known by the alias Ruthless. According to Michael, this man was extremely dangerous. The situation was spiraling out of control, and Michael intended to break off his engagement quickly to protect himself. The man using the alias Ruthless was actually Charles Culo, a notorious figure in criminal circles who had been imprisoned several times. He had committed a string of serious offenses, with most charges related to the distribution of illegal substances. Just days before Michael's death, Charles was released from custody. Jennifer quickly moved in with Charles, but many of her belongings were still at Michael's house. She would occasionally stop by to collect her things, and Michael threatened to give them away to avoid seeing her again. Michael's friend mentioned that he was unhappy about Jennifer's affair. However, Michael chose not to compete with people from the criminal world and decided to end the relationship. The police believed this was a pivotal moment in the investigation. They had a new prime suspect, Charles, who would not have hesitated to shoot a defenseless elderly man. It was suspected that Charles accompanied her to Michael's house. And Charles and Jennifer simply wanted to make a profit, so they killed Michael so they wouldn't be hindered. Meanwhile, Jennifer missed a scheduled check-in with the inspector, which allowed the police to detain her and bring her to justice. On August 25, 2017, police officers went to the motorcycle repair shop where Jennifer worked and arrested her for violating her probation. Later, one of Jennifer's cellmates reported that she behaved very suspiciously during her imprisonment and confessed to intentionally killing Michael. The investigators brought Jennifer's in for questioning and informed her that she was suspected of being involved in the murder. She chose not to answer their questions and instead hired a lawyer. Meanwhile, a warrant was issued to access the communication devices of Jennifer. Jennifer's phone was found at the crime scene at 9:45 p.m. during her correspondence with Michael, confirming she was present at the time of the murder. Afterward, her phone's geolocation showed she traveled about 20 kilometers south to Charles's trailer, arriving there around 11 p.m. Michael's phone remained at the house until about 1 a.m. before moving towards the river, where it stopped working, likely after being thrown into the water. If Jennifer had already left the scene, who took the phone? An electronics expert discovered that Jennifer's phone automatically connected to Michael's Wi-Fi network at about 9:45 p.m. on August 6, 2017, when the murder occurred. This suggests she was very close to the router at that time. The police continued their investigation and discovered that Jennifer had a second mobile phone. They accessed this device, which actually belonged to Michael and was password protected. There was a risk of being unable to unlock it, but thanks to a list of passwords found on Michael's computer, used by Jennifer, they successfully unlocked the phone. This action uncovered significant evidence. The investigation revealed that shortly before his death, Michael was communicating with Jennifer. While she had deleted much of the information, detectives were able to recover it. Michael intended to contact the FBI to ensure Charles was imprisoned for life. Naturally, Charles could not allow this, so investigators believe he chose to kill Michael. Although Charles's phone was examined, he didn't appear to take these threats seriously. Jennifer, however, reacted more aggressively. Michael indicated he was willing to abandon his plan to contact the FBI if Jennifer returned to him and left Charles. The last message Michael sent before his death was "I love you," to which Jennifer did not respond. After accessing Michael's social media accounts, it was discovered that the day after his death, Jennifer began sharing various stories about the incident with her friends and acquaintances. Jennifer recounted many different stories to everyone. She told some that he had been attacked, but she told some other people that she didn't know what happened because they broke up a long time ago. She did this to spread misinformation and cover her tracks. It was obvious that she and Charles were involved in the murder. Eventually, the detective spoke with Charles, and he confessed. According to him, he was not involved in Michael's death. The murder was committed by Jennifer. That day, Jennifer returned to him late in the evening and admitted she had killed Michael. She explained that after an unpleasant conversation, Michael approached her with a gun. She managed to take the gun from him, but it accidentally fired, killing him. Frightened, she left immediately afterward. Jennifer requested to return to Michael to ensure he was either dead or to administer first aid if he was still alive. However, Charles refused to be involved in the crime, so he asked his friend Jerry to take Jennifer to the victim. Jerry, who lived nearby in a trailer with his mother, cooperated with the investigation and confirmed that he drove Jennifer to the river house that evening. He wasn't initially told the reason, but once they arrived, he realized what was happening. It was noted that the crime scene did not resemble a place where a fight had occurred, as Jennifer had claimed, but rather an execution. Michael was sitting in his chair when Jennifer arrived, and she neither checked his pulse nor attempted to help him. Instead, Jennifer collected valuables, removing the watch from his wrist, taking his laptop, and tossing his mobile phone into the river. Jerry then drove her to Charles's trailer. The police discovered traces of she DNA in Michael's pockets, which she had searched. Charles defended himself by explaining that he was not at Michael's house because he had been in an accident shortly before the murder, which left him with serious injuries. At the time, he was using a wheelchair to move around, could barely walk, and was in no condition to commit the crime. Furthermore, he was aware that he needed to avoid any trouble while on probation. Charles was very convincing, and the investigators believed him. They verified his story, confirming that he was indeed recovering from the accident. On September 29, 2017, Jennifer Morrissey was charged with first-degree murder, robbery, and tampering with evidence. The trial was set for January 24, 2019. The prosecutor stated that these charges were linked to several conflicts before the attack. Jennifer felt most upset because Michael did not want to continue funding her lifestyle and left her, which further aggravated her. Additionally, Michael's death was supposed to bring financial gain, as Jennifer claimed an insurance payout of about $500,000. The crucial evidence against Jennifer came from Jerry, a friend of Charles, who testified at the trial. Jerry confirmed that Jennifer returned to the crime scene to eliminate evidence. Due to his cooperation, he was not charged. Likewise, Jennifer's boyfriend Charles was not charged because he also testified against her, even though he initially protected her, delayed contacting the police, and destroyed the murder weapon. Inmates also testified against Jennifer during the trial. The defense argued that Jennifer was not cruel and could not be accused of being vindictive or aggressive. To support this claim, Jennifer chose to testify herself. During the trial, She claimed she went to Michael's house in the evening to collect her belongings. He allegedly met her at the door with a gun, refused her entry, and aimed the gun at her. She said she reacted quickly, a struggle followed, and during the struggle, the gun accidentally went off, shooting he in the face. Jennifer maintained it was an act of self-defense, insisting that if she hadn't shot him, he might have shot her. However, her story didn't align with the fact that Michael was found shot while sitting in a chair, suggesting he wasn't at the door as she claimed. This made her account seem unbelievable. Forensic experts concluded that the most likely scenario was intentional murder. Evidence showed that the gun was about 3 meters from Michael's head when it was fired. Jennifer had aimed precisely between his eyes to kill him swiftly, execution style. There was no evidence of a struggle between them. On February 1, 2019, the jury convened to deliberate a verdict. Jennifer Morrissey was found guilty of first-degree murder, theft, and tampering with evidence. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, she never showed remorse. Michael's son was the most affected during the trial investigations. He repeatedly expressed his hatred towards Jennifer because she took his father away from him. Because of Jennifer, the relationship between him and his father has greatly deteriorated, and now they can no longer be reconciled. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Nicole Lobby. Nicole Lobby, 29 years old, lives with her husband Chris and has a large family in Oregon, USA. Nicole was a beautiful woman, loving wife, amazing mother, and a friend. All she was not afraid to share her faith or her opinion with anyone. Her goal was to make sure that she left this world a better place. When Nicole met Chris, she already had an older daughter. Chris also had 2 daughters, and after they got married, they had a son. Nicole is known for being adventurous, brave, and always looking forward. She overcame a rare cancer and then became very passionate about fitness. Nicole's goal is to become a fitness trainer. Nicole recently started a new job, and no one thought she would be in danger at work. At about 5 p.m. on August 19, 2014, Portland Emergency Services received a call from a man reporting that a woman had been stabbed in the chest. The victim was still alive but had difficulty breathing. So the witness requested that an ambulance be sent to Timber Creek Apartments as soon as possible. Police quickly arrived and spoke with the man who called 911, who gave more details about the incident. He said he and his wife were walking down the stairs of their apartment building to the parking lot when they heard screaming. He turned to his right and saw a woman running toward them, screaming, "He stabbed me, he stabbed me." She told the couple she didn't know the attacker, but he was wearing camouflage pants and a black hoodie. The manager of Timber Creek Apartments identified the victim as Nicole Lobby, 29, a coworker. Nicole was a leasing consultant and had been working there for several weeks. On August 19th, during her work hours, she drove a trolley around the complex delivering letters asking for lease renewals. Along with each letter, Nicole gave each resident a balloon tied to a bag of popcorn. When she was done, she marked each apartment on a map in the trolley. Based on Nicole's notes and the map, detectives determined that the attack may have occurred on a specific stairwell in Timber Creek at the time residents heard Nicole screaming. The attacker may have been waiting for her under this stairwell. There was also a trail of blood from the stairwell and flyers scattered at the bottom of the stairs. During the Washington County Sheriff's Office investigation, several witnesses reported seeing a suspicious young man wearing a black hoodie and camouflage pants near Timber Creek at the time of the attack. Combining the reports and the timing of the sightings, detectives determined the suspect's route through Timber Creek. More than 20 officers were involved in this intensive investigation, assisted by K-9 dogs. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team searched the woods along Cedar Mill Creek, a stream that runs through the Timber Creek residence. During the search, they found several items that were sent to a lab for analysis. Detectives did not disclose the exact findings but said they were investigating every possibility. Investigators are trying to figure out what caused the attack, which took place in broad daylight at an apartment complex with more than 1,000 residents. They have contacted Nicole's husband, Chris Lobby, and informed him of the incident. The police took several steps to identify the attacker. It was not a robbery, and the attacker did not attempt to remove her clothing. This suggested that the motive for the murder might have been a personal dispute. This theory led detectives to her husband, Chris. Chris cooperated with the police and answered questions about his 4-year marriage to Nicole. Investigations revealed that he was at daycare picking up his son at the time of the attack. Therefore, Chris could not have been the attacker. Meanwhile, while interviewing residents at Timber Creek Apartments, the police found 2 more witnesses who saw a man wearing a black hoodie and orange pants. They saw this man, who had similar features to the suspect, running across the street without looking back. Around the same time the attack on Nicole took place, a hooded man was seen running toward the houses across from Timber Creek Apartments. Detectives, working with witnesses, drew up a sketch of the suspect and quickly circulated it throughout the city, even appearing on television news. The city urged anyone who recognized the familiar facial features to report the incident. Detectives also worked with informants to find clues about the killer. The sketch led to several leads. A man said his son knew a man who matched the sketch. His name was Taylor, and he had recently threatened others with a knife. Police found Taylor and brought him in for questioning. Taylor said strange things and seemed to have mental problems. When asked about Nicole, he did not hesitate to admit that he had killed her. However, Taylor's testimony was inconsistent, as he only mentioned information that had already been in the newspaper and gave irrelevant details. As a result, the police eliminated him as a suspect. After the sketch of the suspect appeared in the newspaper, the police received a tip about a man named Nick who had a criminal history. Nick looked similar to the suspect in the sketch. However, he had never done anything similar to what happened to Nicole. He had run-ins with the law before, but he had never physically harmed anyone. The police interviewed Nick and found his behavior disturbing. When asked about Nicole and the crime, he denied any involvement and asked for a lawyer. The police then obtained a search warrant for Nick's home. They found a black hoodie and orange pants, but the hoodie did not match the witness description because it had a bright white logo on the front. Nick's clothes were sent for analysis, but no evidence was found linking him to the crime. Nick's phone records also showed that he was not near the scene of the attack. As a result, the police eliminated Nick as a suspect, and the case went cold. Nicole's family is going through a very difficult time. In an interview with reporters, Chris Lobby shared that he can't stop thinking about what happened to Nicole. He said, "The hard thing is that there are so many unanswered questions. I keep thinking about what happened, different scenarios, and there are no answers to any of them." The police were concerned that the perpetrator might strike again, and their worries became a reality. 3 weeks after Nicole's death, on September 13, 2014, the Eugene Police Department received an alarming call. Eugene is a city about 100 miles from Portland. On that day, a resident was attacked while leaving a bar near Autzen Stadium. Heather Miller, 39, had gone to a bar near the stadium to watch the game. Around 8 p.m., when the game ended, Heather decided to go home. The streets were almost deserted. As she left the bar, she tried to call a taxi but realized her phone was dead. So she decided to walk closer to the stadium to catch one more easily. As she walked along the sidewalk, she noticed someone following her. As she crossed the street and turned around, she saw the man behind her was still following her. She walked faster but was suddenly hit in the back of the head, knocking her unconscious. When she woke up, she found herself face to face with her attacker, who had pulled down her pants in an attempt to sexually assault her. Heather tried to reason with her attacker. She said she had a daughter and begged to see her again, but he continued to beat her. Heather described that every time she spoke, she was punched in the face. Eventually, Heather realized that the only way to survive was to pretend to be dead. She closed her eyes and remained silent. When the attacker thought he had achieved his goal, he ran away. Despite the brutal beating, Heather found the strength to stand up and go out into the street. A minute later, a car stopped and the driver called 911. An ambulance arrived and rushed her to the hospital. Heather regained consciousness and spoke to a detective who arrived shortly afterward. At this time, neither of them knew that the attacker had been arrested at the police station. There was a park near the scene of the attack. A police officer on duty that night saw a man running, stopped him, and saw that his hands and shoes were bloody. The police arrested him and called a patrol car to take him to the station. Jamie Tinoco, 17, was young but had been noticed by the police many times. At the time of his arrest, he was on probation for illegal possession. Jamie had been using drugs since he was 12, and his parents had no control over him. Jamie had dropped out of high school since his freshman year and was arrested for driving without a license the day before the attack on Heather, but was released shortly after. During questioning, Jamie confessed to attacking Heather. The man was completely calm and nonchalant, believing he had done nothing wrong. His actions led the Eugene Police Department to suspect that Heather was not his first victim. Police released his photo, hoping that other women affected by him would come forward. Soon after, detectives investigating Nicole Lobby's death saw a photo of Jamie released by Eugene Police. They believed Jamie matched the sketch of the suspect they had. Further investigation revealed that Jamie lived with his parents in Portland and that their apartment was across the street from Timber Creek, which further fueled their suspicions that he was involved in Nicole Lobby's death. Detectives questioned Jamie about Nicole's case, hoping that he would admit to assaulting her, as he had confessed to attacking Heather Miller. However, Jamie insisted that he had nothing to do with Nicole's death and refused to answer questions. Police needed to find evidence to link him to Nicole Lobby's death. As mentioned earlier, Jamie lived across the street from his parents at Timber Creek Apartments. As a result, the police obtained a search warrant for his parents' apartment. They found a black hoodie and orange pants in Jamie's room and sent them to a lab for analysis. However, the lab results were disappointing, with no trace of Nicole's DNA on any of Jamie's belongings, and the investigation seemed to hit a dead end. While there is no evidence to prove that Jamie killed Nicole, there is enough evidence to link him to the attack on Heather Miller. He did not deny his actions and seemed proud of being a young thug. At his trial in connection with the attack on Heather Miller, he smiled and said he had no remorse for his actions. Jamie had broken away from a group of delinquent teens on a trip supervised by the Washington County Juvenile Department. He followed Heather, attacked her from behind, and dragged her into the bushes near Atson Stadium. Heather said she still has nightmares and flashbacks and chipped her front teeth after the attack. She has had to find a new job. The injuries she suffered in the attack, including a broken nose, required reconstructive surgery to recover. "There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what happened," she said in Lane County District Court. "I pray that Jamie will never have the opportunity to do this to another person and impact their life the way he impacted mine." Heather Miller held hands with two family members as she sat with more than a dozen supporters before reading her statement aloud. Jamie grinned in court as the victim recounted the horrifying details of the attack she endured. When the judge asked why Jamie was smiling, he replied that he did not know. The judge called Jamie's lack of remorse appalling and labeled him a danger to the community, then imposed the maximum sentence. Heather, comforted by friends and family after the hearing, said, "His behavior was disrespectful and unrepentant, and the judge's sentence was fully deserved. A courageous mother of two, Heather pleaded with the judge that Jamie would never have the opportunity to harm another person. She did not want him to think he had won and brought her down. So she kept her composure from the start. Although the defense tried to portray Jamie as a young man who had been affected by substance abuse for years, the judge noted that his behavior in court clearly reflected character issues. Jamie's lawyer asked the judge to sentence his client to 8 years and 4 months in prison, arguing that Jamie was remorseful for what he had done. However, Jamie did not apologize when the judge allowed him to speak. He refused to make any statements. Judge Deborah Vogt sentenced Jamie to 14 years and 2 months in prison, explaining that his lack of remorse justified the harsh sentence. "The community needs to be protected from a dangerous man like this," she said. "As much as people want me to see him as a boy, I can't." When Jamie becomes eligible for release, he will be in his early 30s and will have to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. As for Heather, her family said she is looking forward to starting a new job and being able to move on with her life. Meanwhile, investigators decided to take advantage of Jamie's ego to get him to confess. They questioned him about Nicole Lobby's death. The detectives told him that he would get more respect in prison if the other inmates knew that he was not only the coward who attacked one woman from behind but also the one who killed another. After a few minutes of silence, Jamie began talking about Nicole, saying that he didn't mean to kill her. He wanted to feel the sensation of stabbing someone, but he didn't mean to kill Nicole, just hurt her. He said that when he was walking from his apartment to Timber Creek, he saw Nicole park her car and bring a balloon to her second-floor apartment. As Nicole climbed the stairs, he hid behind the car, then ran up the stairs and stabbed Nicole when she turned around. Jamie said he chose Nicole because he thought she would be an easy target. When asked if he would try to force Nicole to have sex, like he did with Heather Miller, he casually replied, "Oh, I've thought about it. I would." Jamie said he didn't do it because Nicole screamed when she stabbed him, so he ran away during the reenactment. Jamie showed investigators how he escaped the scene. Chris Lobby said he was shocked to learn that his wife's killer was only 17. "I have a 13-year-old daughter," he said. "It's unbelievable and hard to understand that someone 4 years older than her could do this." The trial began in 2015. Despite confessing under questioning, Jamie has pleaded not guilty in court. His attorney argued that there was no DNA evidence linking him to the scene. "I'm just asking for leniency for a 17-year-old boy with a serious mental illness who has the potential to change with treatment," defense attorney Robert Axford said. The defense's only witness was a psychologist who evaluated Jamie and determined he had symptoms of schizophrenia. However, a psychologist at Oregon State Hospital determined that Jamie had a personality disorder, not schizophrenia. His video confession and reenactment convinced the jury of Jamie's guilt. During his reenactment, he described details that only Nicole Lobby's attacker would know. During the sentencing phase, the jury had two options: life in prison without parole or life in prison with the possibility of parole in 30 years. The jury determined that there were no mitigating circumstances sufficient to impose a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 30 years. As a result, in 2017, Jamie Tinoco was found guilty on all counts. Jamie, then 20, stood in the Washington County courtroom between his two attorneys when Court of Appeals Judge Kirsten Thompson asked him if he had anything to say before she formally sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He put his hands down in front of his waistband, his mouth twitching slightly. "I beg for forgiveness," Jamie said before sitting down. Chris Lobby, Nicole's husband, said Jamie's family came to see his family after the sentencing to express their condolences and apologize. But that's not the end of the story. In 2021, the Oregon Court of Appeals overturned Jamie's 2017 conviction. Juvenile law has changed since Tinoco was tried on a Measure 11 charge. Under the new reform, offenders between the ages of 15 and 17 are no longer automatically sent to adult court. The new law requires prosecutors to hold a hearing to decide whether juveniles charged with serious crimes should be transferred to adult court. If the case is retried, Jamie's attorneys could ask for a lighter sentence. The decision to overturn the conviction came as a shock to Nicole Lobby's family, who were not expecting it. Nicole's father, Rich Jones, said they will have to go through another emotional ordeal. Jamie remains in prison, but this is not the end of Nicole Lobby's case. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Deborah Jeter. Deborah Jeter was born in 1976 in Georgia, USA. She was raised in a loving family and since childhood had a passion for helping people. When it came time to choose a career, Deborah decided to become a nurse without hesitation. She enrolled in a local college and pursued her nursing education. Alongside her studies, Deborah also focuses on building relationships. Deborah's boyfriend is a young man named Lester Jeter. They began a romantic relationship, and later both decided to move forward with married life. After marriage, they had 2 children. Their first child, named Kern, a year later, they had a second child. Because of their close age gap, the siblings were very close and did everything together. After graduating from college, Deborah to work part-time as an anatomy and physiology teacher. She also joined an exchange program as a licensed professional nurse. From an early age, Deborah's daughters began experiencing problems. Deborah often shows aggression towards her children, and sometimes she has no control over her behavior. In 2004, she was accused of physically assaulting her eldest daughter, Kirsten, during a quarrel. However, this was the first and only incident of such behavior, so the charges were eventually dropped. As a result of this incident, Deborah was briefly hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and then underwent rehabilitation. She was diagnosed with several disorders, which were the cause of her depression. The experts concluded that Deborah's unusual behavior was linked to her mental disorders. The doctors reported that she managed to get these issues under control after receiving therapy. However, some of Deborah's neighbors believe she is still having difficulty controlling her behavior. Her frequent aggressive outbursts affected her husband and children, and she often acted impulsively. She would yell over anything, which was alarming. The situation seemed serious, as the police were repeatedly called to her house. However, every time the officers arrived, she would calm down. After the incident with Kirsten, Deborah avoided contact with the children. Each time, when the patrol officers would arrive, find nothing amiss, and leave after advising her to remain quiet and calm. Although there were numerous complaints about her loud and hot-tempered behavior, the officers felt powerless to intervene. This situation took a toll on her family, who bore the brunt of her aggression. Deborah's mental health issues seemed to get worse, leading to high tensions. Deborah's husband, Lester, struggled to endure the constant shouting and arguments. By 2009, the situation had become unbearable. In May, Lester decided to end the relationship and filed for divorce. Deborah was devastated. It seemed she genuinely loved her husband, but due to her mental health difficulty, so she was unable to control her behavior. Lester's decision to divorce was a significant shock for Deborah. She repeatedly tried to convince her husband to heal their relationship and discuss their issues. However, Lester was so frustrated with Deborah's behavior that he rejected any talks. Lester openly told his wife that their family had no future and he would never come back. He also mentioned that he intended not only to end the marriage but also to seek custody of the children. Lester was genuinely concerned that his wife might lose control when he wasn't around their daughters, fearing she might harm them. His worries were justified as Deborah's behavior became increasingly erratic. Lester worries about the safety and well-being of his two daughters, Kelsey and Kirsten, but he cannot predict the tragic fate that will befall them. That same month, after Lester declared his intention to divorce, Deborah attempted to end her life. She ingested a lethal dose of antidepressants, but was saved by the doctor's quick response. The most distressing aspect of this incident was that Deborah did this in front of her daughters, making her husband even more worried about her mental health. He feared that the stress of the divorce could worsen Deborah's illnesses. Unfortunately, resolving the legal issues of divorce is time-consuming, making the divorce process complicated and difficult. Nevertheless, Lester was determined to proceed with the divorce to protect the children from their unstable mother. Deborah's mental health issues clearly worsened after her divorce proceedings started. She and her children moved in with her mother. Naturally, Deborah suffered the most, but her frequent outbursts of anger and constant aggression also affected the children. Lester wanted to resolve all the issues quickly to minimize the trauma for the girls. Unfortunately, time was not on his side. Deborah attempted to end her life, which was a shock for the children. They couldn't understand their mother's behavior or the struggles she faced. Meanwhile, Deborah, at 30 years old, risked losing everything she had built with her husband over the years. Her world was falling apart, so it was no surprise that she was deeply shocked. Lester was determined to take action. He understood how serious Deborah's problems were and the danger she posed to herself and others. After Deborah's attempted to end her life, Lester insisted that her contact a psychiatric care center, believing she would receive professional help, an accurate diagnosis, and appropriate treatment there. Deborah took his advice and was admitted on May 22nd, which came as a great relief to Lester. During her treatment, the children stayed with their father, Lester. He also attempted to obtain a restraining order to keep the children away from their mother. During this time, Lester decided that he should seek full custody of both children. He believed Deborah was unable to control herself and tried his best to ensure the children's safety. Lester has repeatedly applied to court to limit Deborah's meeting in contact with the two girls Kirsten and Kelsey. It was expected that she would not be discharged from the hospital after just 2 weeks. Lester believes that such a short period of treatment was not enough for Deborah to control her behavior, so she remains a threat to her children. However, she was discharged on June 4th. By this time, Deborah had not succeeded in gaining full custody despite her efforts. The judge denied issuing a restraining order to limit Deborah's communication with her daughters, considering it excessive. The judge believed the children were not in danger because she had received treatment. A temporary arrangement was made where Deborah would have custody of the children on weekends, while Lester would care for them on weekdays. The day after the custody hearing, on a Friday, June 5, 2009, Deborah planned to pick up the kids around 6 p.m. Although Lester doesn't want to be away from his daughters, he had to comply with the court orders. He had no choice but to hand the children over to Deborah when she arrived to take them for the weekend. Kirsten and Kelsey were happy to see their mother despite her previous rejections. Kirsten and Kelsey genuinely loved her, missed her, and enjoyed spending time with her when she was in a good mood. The eldest daughter, Kirsten, even posted on social media that she would see her mom the next day and expressed her excitement. However, they had no idea of the horrors that awaited. It seemed like a long-anticipated reunion, and Deborah was also eager to see her daughters. During a conversation with Lester, she mentioned that she had a big surprise planned for the children. In reality, a terrible plan had formed in Deborah's mind, which she intended to carry out. Instead of going home, Deborah drove with the children for a while and arrived at an abandoned house near Highway 77. It was a strange and eerie place to take the children. But the girls trusted their mother and followed her, eagerly anticipating the promised surprise. They were impatiently waiting for their mother to organize a special event for them. However, after they entered the house, Deborah pulled out a weapon. Kelsey quickly realized what was happening, but it was too late. She managed to shout to Kirsten to run away. However, Kirsten didn't listen. She charged at their mother, trying to take the knife to protect Kirsten. The struggle was unequal. Deborah stabbed her youngest daughter Kelsey several times. Kelsey was already down, and the eldest daughter Kirsten was desperately fighting with their mother. She pleaded for her to stop, shouting, "This is madness," but Deborah seemed oblivious, ignoring her pleas. Having dealt with Kelsey, Deborah turned on Kirsten, who tried to escape. Deborah struck her, but the wounds were not as deep. The girl began to bleed heavily. Despite this, she clung to life, begging her mother to stop and spare her. Kirsten expressed her desire to live, and perhaps this plea helped Deborah finally regain her senses. She halted the attack and began pacing nervously around the rooms of the abandoned house. In a state of shock, Deborah called the rescue service and confessed that she had killed her child, saying multiple times that she had done so and apologized for her actions. When asked for her location, she informed them that she was in an abandoned house on Highway 77 and mentioned that one of the children was still alive, urging them to hurry and call an ambulance to save the one who wasn't dead. The dispatcher inquired about her name, but Deborah refused to disclose it, stating that she would not reveal her identity. She was pacing around the house, while Kirsten was still alive and pleading for help. Deborah was overwhelmed and couldn't explain what had happened. She asked the dispatcher not to shoot her, stressing that she didn't have a gun. She gave precise directions to the location so law enforcement and medics could find the abandoned house where she had harmed Kirsten and Kelsey. Deborah said one of the girls was already dead, and the other was barely hanging on, as she had cut her throat and was bleeding. She urged them to arrive as quickly as possible, otherwise, the girls' chances of survival were slim. Deborah spoke calmly to the dispatcher, despite being a bit excited. Her voice was generally calm and cold. The dispatcher found Deborah's behavior strange and began to suspect that she had no control over the situation. While waiting for law enforcement, Deborah alternated between calmness and shouting nervously, even insulting the dispatcher. The operator remained composed, continuing the conversation to prevent Deborah from doing anything reckless. Deborah mentioned that if they didn't hurry, she might lose control and harm her second child. She said this completely calmly and without any emotion. The dispatcher realized the situation was extremely serious and that Deborah was unstable. Deborah, who had mental health issues, spoke about her daughters as if they were objects, one whom she has eliminated from her life, while the other is in danger. However, this did not particularly bother Deborah, as she was mainly concerned about her own safety. Deborah repeatedly asked the dispatcher to ensure that the police wouldn't shoot her when they arrived. Although she understood the seriousness of the crime, her focus was on her own well-being, even though one of her daughters is dead, and the other daughter is barely alive. This thing was inconsistent with recent when she tried to end her life, which occurred shortly before the tragedy. However, Deborah clearly did not want to suffer. But is she ready to take responsibility for her actions? The police arrived at the scene and found Deborah on the street, still talking on the phone. She raised her hands to show she had dropped the knife and was unarmed. She repeatedly told the officers not to shoot her, insisting she had no weapons, was not dangerous, and would not attack. Deborah directed the police to an abandoned house where 2 bloody bodies were found inside. Although Deborah was a nurse, she did not attempt to help the children. While speaking to the dispatcher, she walked around the abandoned house and then went outside to avoid seeing the girls' bodies. Deborah wandered around the courtyard while Kirsten sat in blood next to her dead younger sister, Kelsey. Deborah's car was in the garage of the abandoned house, with a small knife on the car roof, the same knife she used to commit the massacre. The police quickly found the knife and arrested Deborah, placing her under constant surveillance due to concerns she might try to harm herself. Inside the abandoned building, officers encountered a horrifying scene. They discovered two girls. One of them, Kelsey, was in the bathroom, covered in blood. Because of her injuries, she died at that moment, having bled out in less than a minute. Kelsey was only 12 years old, and her mother had stabbed her with such force that she succumbed to the bleeding almost instantly. It's hard to imagine what Kirsten went through. She was found with similar injuries in the bedroom, but was still alive when rescuers arrived. Kirsten lay in a pool of her own blood, her eyes indifferent, indicating she had lost a big amount of blood. Quick action was crucial to save her life. Her throat was cut from right to left, damaging her airways and one of the main arteries. Surprisingly, her mother, Deborah, a nurse, attempted to clamp the wound to stop the bleeding while waiting for the medics. This may increase her chances of survival. In an emergency situation, the doctors rushed Kirsten out of the abandoned house and took her to Parkland Hospital in Dallas. They performed an emergency operation and battled to save her life for hours. Miraculously, the girl survived. After 4 days, Kirsten was moved from intensive care to a regular ward. Her recovery was incredible, especially since it was initially thought she wouldn't make it. However, her challenges were far from over. Though she narrowly escaped death, a more troubling fact was that she and her sister were found in that abandoned house, having been attacked by their own mother. It's hard to comprehend the extent of the post-traumatic shock Kirsten experienced. During the summer, she was recovering from the operation, trying to come to terms with the fact that her younger sister Kelsey is dead and the fact that her mother was a murderer. At the time of the crime, Deborah lived with her mother in the small town of Malacca, Texas, which had a population of just 2,000 people. Investigators reviewed Deborah's cell phone records and discovered that after taking the children from their father, Deborah headed to Malakoff. There, she seemed to wander along the roads for a while, then she eventually stopping the abandoned house. Detectives believed Deborah was searching for a place to harm the children. Examining the actions of people with mental disorders is difficult, yet the incident in the abandoned house provides disturbing things into Deborah's motives. When life falls apart, depression and mental issues can lead some women to feel that ending their lives is the only option. In many cases, they kill their children first, believing it to be a merciful act. Under the strain of mental illness, a mother may think that her family's collapse will doom her children to endless suffering. In this mindset, she views murder as a way to free them from pain and hardship. Often, these women then take their own lives. In this situation, it's evident that Deborah had no intention of dying. She was frightened and did not harm herself, even fearing that the police might shoot her, showing that she valued her life. The murders of Kirsten and Kelsey were clearly motivated by revenge, intended to hurt Lester extreme pain. She aimed to deliver a cunning and cruel blow to him. The incident was truly alarming. Kirsten and Kelsey's father, Lester, tried to give this case a big push to draw attention to the trial, literally the day after the judge refused to issue a restraining order against Deborah. Instead, the judge agreed at the hearing that she would have custody of her daughter by the end of the week. This decision later raised many questions about whether the judge considered this decision reckless. Unfortunately, Lester's worst fears were confirmed. Deborah killed Kelsey and almost took the life of Kirsten. Lester tried his best to convince the judge that his daughters were in mortal danger. Under no circumstances were they allowed to see Deborah unsupervised. However, the judge maintained that their main goal is to strengthen and unite families, encourage parents to cooperate with each other, to ensure children receive love from both parents. This decision ultimately led to devastating consequences, but the judge's actions were still deemed legal, despite the tragedy that followed. The district attorney stated that it's not fair to blame only the judge for this situation. According to him, responsibility belongs to many parties: the doctors who allowed Deborah to leave the hospital, Lester, along with Deborah. Deborah was expected to face severe punishment due to her past actions. She had previously shown anger and aggression towards her children, including attempting to harm Kirsten. However, the decision to lift the prohibition order on her is still controversial and raises many questions. Generally, in 99% of cases, shared custody benefits children, allowing both parents to support, love, and communicate with them, fostering healthy development. Yet, this approach fails when a parent has serious mental health issues. Child Protection Services claim they were unaware of Deborah's behavior. Staff stated that if they had known about her try to end her life in front of the children, she would never have been allowed unsupervised contact. From that point on, people also focused on the possibility that the family had clearly become victims of leniency on the part of the mental hospital and the justice system. However, this could not be proven. It was known that Deborah had been in and out of such institutions multiple times, with discharges that came too soon. A comprehensive diagnosis typically requires at least 3 months of testing and observation. Treatment and medication may be prescribed based on test results, but their effectiveness is not guaranteed. Doctors then closely monitor the patient's condition, behavioral changes, and the progression of the disease, adjusting medication as needed. This process can take up to a month. And discharge is only considered after a stable improvement in the patient's condition. However, Deborah was released after just a few weeks, suggesting that she did not undergo the full range of required examinations and tests. Deborah promised Lester that she would take Kirsten and Kelsey out and give them a surprise. She wanted to plan a fun evening with activities like singing and reading. However, just 4 hours later, she called emergency services and confessed to killing her children. Her trial lasted a year, and on May 27, 2010, Deborah Jeter was formally charged with aggravated murder and attempted murder. Throughout the proceedings, Deborah was held in prison due to the high bail amount of $1, which was unaffordable and reflected the severity of the crime. As a result, she remained behind bars until the start of her trial. Deborah's defense team proposed a deal to the prosecution due to the complexity and sensitive nature of the case. Prosecutors fear that Deborah's mental illness could lead to her being released without jail time. Furthermore, a full trial would require Kirsten, Deborah's daughter who had miraculously survived her mother's attack, to testify in court. To spare Kirsten the trauma of reliving the horrific incident, Deborah agreed to plead guilty to a lesser charge, hoping to avoid the death penalty under Texas law. About a year after the murder, Lester and Kirsten visited Deborah in prison. Deborah explained that, due to the turmoil in her life at the time, so she genuinely believed killing her youngest daughter Kelsey was the only way to protect her children from future suffering. She thought that the family's breakup would cause everyone immense pain and, in her mentally unstable state, she saw the murder as the only solution, a twisted form of salvation. Deborah expressed regret about what happened, but she admitted that she still hates Lester and blames him for the tragedy, and she will never forgive him. Kirsten reminisced warmly about the past with her mother. They talked calmly and even laughed together. This was the last time Deborah could peacefully meet with her loved ones. Afterward, she was moved to another prison and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In her situation, this is seen as a lenient punishment because, without admitting guilt, she could have faced the death penalty. Lester was deeply shocked by the incidents, but inspired by his daughter, he decided to move forward. In 2015, he rebuilt his life, remarried, and he and Kirsten removed their social media profiles. Eventually, Kirsten reactivated her account but set it to private. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Linda Slayton. Linda Slayton was born on March 8, 1950. By the time she was 16, she was pregnant with her first son, Jeff Slayton. 3 years later, she gave birth to a second son, Tim Slayton. Soon after, she managed to convince the father of her two sons, Frank Sladen, to get married so they could start a proper family. However, a happy family was far from what she thought. Frank turned out to be an abusive husband who would routinely abuse her and the two kids. Plagued by his alcoholism and addiction, he would turn violent whenever he got drunk. Jeff and Tim recall that their father would often turn into a monster. He was a violent alcoholic and would beat the three of them without any conscience. The thought of filing for divorce soon ran through Linda's mind, and in 1974, Linda Sladen finally became free. She divorced Frank Sladen after 9 volatile years of their marriage. Linda started her new life as a single mom with 2 teenage sons. She tried her best to provide for her family and be there for her sons as a caring mother, juggling work and chores. It was obvious that she had limited financial capabilities. They didn't have a car, so her sons would often go to school either by walking or by sharing rides if they were offered one. Apart from school, Jeff and Tim loved playing football, but since they didn't have a ride to football practice, their coach, Coach Joseph, would often pick them up and drop them off at or nearby their home. A week before the 4th of September, Linda was preparing her home to welcome her mother. She wanted her mother to move in since she thought her presence in the house would help get it in order and make it more homely. Her sister Judy would also often come by to visit her. During her visits, the sisters would spend their time together over a hot cup of coffee. On the 3rd of September, 1981, Jeff Sladen came home from football practice, but when he found nothing to eat at home, he headed over to his grandparents' place. Later, at about 9:30 p.m., Jeff returned home only to find the house empty. Around 11:30 p.m., Linda and Tim, her younger son, came home. She mentioned going to a neighbor's place to play a game of cards, but before that Jeff saw his mom doing the dishes. Tim, on the other hand, went to sleep. Around this time, her son Jeff came up to her and apologized since the two had fought earlier that day. As they made up, Linda said goodnight to her boys. Jeff remembers saying these words, "I love you, Mom. I'll see you tomorrow." Little did he know those would be the last words he would say to her. On September 4th, 1981, around 8:30 a.m., Judy arrived at Linda's apartment. She went up to Linda's room and knocked on the door twice. There was no answer. She thought Linda might still be in bed, but it was unusual as Linda usually woke up before the boys left for school. As she made her way out of the house, she noticed something strange. The window in Linda's room had a missing something, and on top of that, the window was wide open. Judy returned to Linda's room, knocked again, and this time opened the door to find Linda's lifeless body. She screamed, which caught the attention of a neighbor near the house, and he immediately called 911. Linda was found dead with a wire clothes hanger around her neck. Her body was partially naked, and she lay right across the bed with her head down on the floor. There were no signs of struggle. Her cupboard was wide open, and apart from that, all the other things in the room were in their usual places. Within a matter of minutes, the Lakeland police, news reporters, and medical services all arrived. The yellow sign was plastered all over Linda's home. Tim and Jeff were both awakened by police officers and were asked to leave their home, which was now a crime scene. While Jeff was able to get past his mother's room without seeing her lifeless body, Tim saw his mother one last time, but this time she wasn't alive. The two were then sent to live with their grandparents pending further investigation. After her sons were sent to stay with their grandparents, Sergeant Edgar Pickett from the Lakeland Police Department arrived at the crime scene. He led the investigation and discovered important evidence. Initially, Sergeant Edgar found several fingerprints in Linda's bedroom. While most of the prints matched Linda, one palm print was different. This palm print was located on the windowsill of Linda's bedroom, which was missing a window sheet. To uncover the truth about Linda's death, an autopsy was performed. The examination revealed multiple bruises and marks on her arms, shoulders, and neck. Additionally, her body was found partially naked, suggesting a possible sexual assault. The autopsy concluded that she had first been brutally beaten, then sexually assaulted, and ultimately strangled with a metal clothes hanger from her own home. Among the evidence collected, a palm print was the most important, as it could directly identify the perpetrator if matched. However, at the time, forensic DNA analysis was not available. As a result, the police had to thoroughly investigate her entire family tree to identify potential suspects. The first suspect was Frank Sladen, Linda's ex-husband. When Linda divorced Frank in 1975, she described him as aggressive and abusive, neglecting his family. This made him a key person of interest in the case. He was questioned by police, but they discovered that he was at home in Alabama on the night Linda was killed. Despite this alibi, they continued to have suspicions about him. The second suspect was Linda's son, Jeff. Authorities considered him a suspect because he had a heated argument with his mother shortly before her death. Jeff had a complex relationship with Linda. As the eldest son, he felt the weight of growing up in a household with an abusive father and later with a single mother. Although they sometimes clashed, Jeff always tried to reconcile. On the night of the murder, he and Linda had made up before he went to bed. The police interrogated him about the incident and asked him to take 2 polygraph tests. After he passed both tests, the police cleared him as a suspect. The third suspect was Linda's boyfriend at the time of her murder. Linda, a single mother, had recently started dating a white male whose name has not been disclosed. He had a good relationship with Linda and her children. However, after the police conducted a background check and polygraph tests, he was cleared as a suspect. By this point, the investigation was running low on leads. In September 2001, nearly a year after Linda's murder, they received a tip about a 24-year-old man named Jimmy Omer, who was rumored to have committed a similar crime. At that time, he was connected to an incident in which he pulled a 10-year-old girl through her bedroom window and nearly killed her. The similarities between his crimes and Linda's case led the police to consider him the main suspect. Unfortunately, Jimmy died before the investigation could take place, which meant they couldn't get a DNA match without exhuming his body. Fortunately, his mother agreed to a DNA test and provided a sample. However, the results showed no match. If not for Jimmy's family or the convict next door, who could have killed Linda? As time passed, days turned into weeks and then months. In Lakeland, detectives explored other suspects, but no one was charged, and the lack of new leads caused the case to go cold. The Sladen brothers faced a difficult new reality. Their mother was gone, leaving only their grandparents, Clarence and Margaret Harris, to care for them. While the investigation proceeded, Linda's parents and sons held her funeral, after which they gradually began to resume their normal lives. The brothers returned to school, and as time went on, they started to heal from the events at 303 North Brunel Parkway. Tim resumed playing football and fondly remembers how supportive his teammates and coach were, especially when he didn't have a ride home. Coach Joseph consistently drove him to and from practice. A month later, Tim hung a photograph of his team on his bedroom wall, and that picture became a source of motivation for him to move forward. In the years after their mother's death, the young brothers matured into men who cherished their own families. Jeff married and had 2 children, while Tim also started a family. Over time, both brothers regularly contacted the investigators to inquire about the progress of their mother's case. Although Jeff and Tim had built successful lives for themselves, they remained committed to ensuring the investigation progressed. 17 years after Linda's death, the police continued their investigation. By 1998, Sergeant Edgar Pickett had retired, and Linda Sladen case was handed over to a new team, with Detective Brad Grace taking on the case. While reviewing the evidence, he discovered unidentified DNA from the Linda case that had been collected in 1981. He sent this DNA to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Major Crime Lab, known as the FDLE. By 1999, the FDLE Crime Lab successfully developed a complete DNA profile of Linda Slayton's unknown killer. After obtaining the DNA profile, he revisited the list of suspects, determined to collect DNA samples from each of them. It was now 2001, and Detective Brad was confident that the DNA match would identify the murderer. He made it a priority to speak with the Slayton brothers first and soon arranged a meeting with them. When the brothers arrived, Detective Brad collected their DNA samples and sent them for testing. The results showed no match, which completely cleared Jeff's name from the case. Next, the investigation focused on Frank Slayton. By this time, Frank had stopped drinking and seemed to have lost some of his aggressive and abusive behavior following Linda's death. During this period, Tim and Jeff were also able to reconnect with their father and heal some past wounds. Frank agreed to provide his DNA for testing, but it did not match the unidentified DNA profile that Detective Brad believed belonged to the murderer. In 2005, Detective Brad submitted the unidentified DNA profile from Linda case to the FBI's National DNA Database, where it was regularly compared with new DNA samples. Throughout his investigation, he eliminated dozens of suspects using DNA evidence. However, he retired in 2015 after dedicating 17 years to the Linda Slayton. After Detective Grace, Linda case was handed over to new detectives Tommy Hathcock and Russell Hurley. 3 years into the investigation, Detective Tommy discovered that the FDLE had developed an innovative technology to identify previously unidentifiable DNA. Seizing this opportunity, he sent the unidentified DNA from Linda case to Cece, a genetic genealogist with the FDLE. Cece uploaded the DNA to a public genealogy website she manages, which generated a list of individuals related to the unidentified killer. She then gathered information from birth and marriage certificates, obituaries, and social media to construct a genetic family tree. As the investigation progressed, Cece developed 3 branches of the family tree for the suspect, ultimately pinpointing the individual most likely responsible for Linda's murder. The DNA profile strongly indicated that he was indeed the murderer. The situation took a surprising turn that even shocked Tim and Jeff. The photo hanging on Tim's bedroom wall featured Joseph, commonly known as Coach Joseph, standing just above his shoulder. After learning the killer's identity, Detective Tommy and Russell investigated Joseph's background. They found a history of crimes, including grand theft through forgery of a will. Although he was never formally charged, the police had collected his palm and fingerprints. You may remember that Sergeant Edgar Pickett found a palm print on the windowsill at the crime scene. This discovery brought hope that the family of the deceased could finally find closure in a cold case that had remained unsolved for over 40 years. Investigators compared the palm prints taken from Linda's windowsill in 1981 with Joseph's palm print and found a match. However, they still needed to compare a recent DNA sample from Joseph with the DNA from Linda case. They decided to obtain his DNA for testing without his knowledge. The investigators took garbage bags from Joseph's house and examined them at the police station for potential DNA evidence. Among the items, they discovered a piece of medical adhesive tape, which they sent to the crime lab for analysis. While waiting for the DNA results, the detectives further explored Joseph's personal life. He had lived in Kathleen, Florida, for most of his 58 years, just 30 minutes from the crime scene. Joseph had children and grandchildren, and they also got married. After nearly 2 weeks, the crime lab results confirmed that the unknown DNA found matched Joseph's DNA on the medical adhesive tape. Consequently, in December 2019, detectives arrested Joseph and brought him in for questioning. In 1981, Joseph was around 20 years old when he committed a crime. The day after the murder, the police spoke to him over the phone. During this brief call, Joseph claimed he had dropped Tim off after football practice on September 3, 1981, the night before the murder. Despite this, the police did not consider him a suspect at the time. Joseph also told investigators that Linda had invited him over for consensual sex, but the detectives knew this was not true. They suspected that Joseph had been targeting Linda prior to the murder because he frequently picked up Tim for football practice and dropped him off at his home afterward. Additionally, Joseph lived nearby, which raised further suspicion. On the night of September 3, 1981, Joseph dropped Tim off at his house after football practice. Later that evening, when no one was home, he returned to the house and broke in through Linda's bedroom window. He hid in her closet and waited for her to go to bed. Once she was asleep, he attacked her, sexually assaulted her, and ultimately strangled her with a wire hanger from the closet. Joseph pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and sexual battery. During his sentencing, Linda Slayton's family confronted him, asking why he killed her. One family member expressed their pain, saying, "I just want to know why. Why did you take my mom away?" Joseph only replied, "I am a good person," and did not apologize or explain his actions. The judge sentenced Joseph to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although the Slayton brothers find some comfort in knowing that Joseph will never be released from prison, they are furious that he enjoyed years of freedom while they grew up without their mother. For Tim, this realization was shocking, especially since Coach Joseph was a role model for him. He recalls that Joseph would often inquire about the case, asking if there had been any updates on finding the culprit. To stay under the radar, Joseph offered his assistance, making things easier for the boys during football practice. He'd ask us how the case was going. He wasn't probing for details, just wanting to know if there was any new information or leads. And I would say, no, nothing. Even now, Tim struggles to accept that the person he trusted most could be his mother's killer. He reflects, "I've had the killer's picture on my table at home all this time and never realized it." Jeff, who is still grieving, often wonders what life would have been like if Linda were still alive. Tim and Jeff have stayed very close after the incident. They often visit their mother's grave, and on the anniversary of her death, Jeff always lights a candle. Despite everything they've been through, they continue to live life to the fullest in her memory. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Jessica Patel. Jessica Patel was born on September 16, 1983, in Leeds, West Yorkshire, England, where she grew up in a traditional Hindu community. As the eldest child, she developed a diligent and obedient nature from a young age. Jessica excelled academically, helped with household chores, and maintained a bright and cheerful personality. Jessica had a large social circle, but she was particularly close to a boy 3 years her senior, who was more reserved and shy. They often spent time together, and as Jessica matured, she blossomed into a beautiful young woman. Like many of her peers, she longed to find true love and build a happy family, much like the characters in her favorite movies. However, her romantic aspirations did not detract from her intelligence and determination. To achieve her goals, Jessica pursued higher education. In 2002, she enrolled at De Montfort University in Leicester, and 4 years later, she began studying pharmacy at the University of Manchester. There, she reconnected with Mitesh, an acquaintance who coincidentally attended the same faculty. They initially had no romantic feelings for each other, but over time, it turned into true love. This relationship has helped Mitesh grow and become more confident in himself. He is also accumulating knowledge and becoming more mature. Mitesh was extremely kind and caring towards Jessica, showering her with compliments and gifts. However, their happiness was short-lived. Jessica's mother passed away due to an incurable illness, leaving her devastated. Mitesh stood by Jessica's side, providing emotional support and comfort during this difficult time. As a result, their bond grew stronger. Jessica confided in her sister that she had finally found a trustworthy partner. Mitesh seemed perfect in every way, and she envisioned a happy marriage. In 2008, Mitesh asked Jessica's father for permission to marry her, following traditional Hindu customs. Although her father had reservations about Mitesh and felt that they were too young to get married, Jessica convinced him otherwise. They eventually got married in July 2009. The wedding was held in the beautiful garden of the bride's home. Initially, the newlyweds, Mitesh and Jessica, seemed like a perfect couple. However, things took a turn for the worse soon after. Mitesh's behavior changed dramatically. He became distant and cold, leaving Jessica feeling lonely. Their intimate life also suffered, and they didn't have any physical relationship for about 10 months after their wedding. This was very distressing for Jessica, who couldn't understand why Mitesh's feelings towards her had changed so drastically. Jessica tried to find fault in herself, wondering if she was the reason for Mitesh's change in. Meanwhile, she had just graduated from university in 2010 and was looking forward to starting her career as a pharmacist. She has a good education and a promising career. However, Mitesh's attitude continued to deteriorate. He became increasingly controlling and suspicious, constantly monitoring Jessica's every move. In February, her family suffered another grief. Her grandfather falls ill, his health begins to decline rapidly, and death seems inevitable. Manal's husband does not allow Jessica to spend much time with her family. This was the root of the conflict between they. When Manal confronted her husband about this, he became angry and responded by punching her in the face. As a result, when her grandfather was seriously ill, Jessica was only able to visit him a few times. Jessica comes from a traditional Indian family where his word is the law, restricting her from making her own choices. She felt trapped in a lonely marriage. One day, she confided in her family about her concerns. She expressed her suspicion that her husband, Mitesh, was being unfaithful. She noticed that whenever he received a phone call, he would excuse himself to another room. Additionally, he often stayed up late, spending hours alone, which further fueled her doubts. In 2012, Jessica's suspicions about her husband's infidelity were confirmed when she discovered romantic messages on his phone. Seeking help, she confided in Mitesh's cousin, with whom she had a good relationship. Instead of offering help or advice, the cousin blamed Jessica for her husband's behavior, implying that she was responsible for his infidelity. This response from Mitesh's cousin left Jessica feeling isolated and unsupported. To make matters worse, Mitesh also prohibited her from seeking comfort from her own sisters. It became clear that Mitesh was hiding something and trying to maintain his reputation and authority within the family and local community. In 2014, Mitesh and Jessica relocated to Lynor, a suburb of Middlesbrough in North Yorkshire, in an effort to start anew and distance themselves from their family. They purchased a large house, made renovations, and later opened their own pharmacy. Jessica had hoped that this fresh start would bring positive changes to their relationship. While their relationship did improve slightly, one thing was still missing: children. For 6 years, Jessica struggled with infertility, and Mitesh made veiled threats that he would leave her if she didn't become pregnant. In October 2015, she decided to go through in vitro fertilization. However, the initial attempts were unsuccessful, causing her to become increasingly anxious and depressed, especially with the added stress of hormone treatments. To make matters worse, Mitesh's behavior changed. He became distant and cold towards her at home. He would only show affection in public, and even then, it seemed superficial. He was often preoccupied with his phone, and the tension between them became unbearable. She reached her breaking point and suggested they separate, confessing that she was unhappy in the marriage. Mitesh's response caught her off guard. He claimed to love her and promised that things would improve over time. He even suggested that having a baby would strengthen their family bond. Jessica believed his words. For a moment she felt comforted and listened to, and her doubts subsided. On May 9, 2018, Mitesh and Jessica Patel received the exciting news that 3 of their embryos had been successfully fertilized, with a transfer scheduled for the following month. Jessica was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a mother and eagerly shared the news with her family. Tragically, their happiness was short-lived. A few days later, on the evening of May 14, 2018, Mitesh Patel made a frantic call to the emergency services, reporting that he had found his wife's body at their home. He claimed that he had left the house earlier to buy food and pick up his laptop from work. When he returned home, he found that the house had been burglarized and Jessica was lying unconscious on the living room floor. Mitesh told police that Jessica's skin was cold to the touch and there were bruises on her neck. He was clearly distressed, crying as he spoke. The police assured him that rescuers were on the way. When the officers arrived, they found Jessica's body on the living room floor, her wrists and ankles bound with duct tape. A grocery bag was nearby. Despite the medical team's efforts, Jessica died on the scene. The investigators sought to determine the motive behind the heinous crime. Upon examination, they found that the house had been thoroughly ransacked, with drawers and closets turned upside down. It was evident that the perpetrators had been searching for valuables, as they had even torn apart their bed mattress. The missing jewelry and cash further supported the notion that the primary motive was robbery. Jessica's husband, Mitesh, also believed that their house had been targeted by robbers. According to Mitesh's statement, on the day of the incident, he followed his usual routine, working a morning shift, going to the gym, and returning home afterward. His wife came home around 7 p.m. Later, Mitesh decided to order pizza and left the house at 7:44 p.m. Surveillance footage from a nearby pizzeria corroborated his alibi. Before leaving the pizzeria, he tried to call his wife to tell her he was on his way home, but no one picked up. Mitesh stopped at a pharmacy without notice, so he returned home later than expected. When Mitesh returned home at 8:50 p.m., he was met with a gruesome scene. His wife was bound, and their belongings were scattered everywhere. Neighbors was left reeling after the tragic event. This neighborhood is known as a wealthy and peaceful place, and has never had a crime before. The autopsy report revealed that Jessica's cause of death was strangulation, with the attacker using a bag, bare hands, and an electrical cord to ensure her demise. Since there were no signs of forced entry, investigators initially suspected that Jessica knew her attacker and had let them into the house. Jessica's family quickly arrived and comforted Mitesh, who appeared to be extremely sad and lost over the passing of his wife. However, the police had their suspicions, and a thorough search of the house uncovered some crucial clues that would eventually lead to the capture and trial of the perpetrator. A health monitoring app on Jessica's phone also played an important role in finding the truth. 3 days after Jessica's murder, the lead investigator contacted her father, who was still near the crime scene, and asked him and other relatives to return home so as not to interfere with the ongoing investigation. The investigator promised to provide more information later. Meanwhile, detectives were preparing to arrest the prime suspect in the case, Mitesh Patel. Several key pieces of evidence had led them to this conclusion. During the search of the crime scene, police found a damaged hard drive from a surveillance camera installed in front of the front door. The device was discovered in a suitcase under the bed. Further investigation uncovered a hidden photograph in their nightstand that showed Mitesh embracing another man named Amit. Additionally, footage from a camera across the street revealed that only Mitesh and Jessica entered and exited their home on the day of the murder, May 14th. The footage shows that Mitesh returned home at 3:30 p.m. Jessica arrived home from work at 7 p.m., and Mitesh left the house briefly to pick up pizza at 7:44 p.m., returning at 8:50 p.m. Since no one else was seen entering or leaving the house, the evidence pointed to one conclusion: Mitesh was the likely perpetrator. Mitesh was the prime suspect in the investigation, but the police lacked concrete evidence against him. As the detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a shocking secret that Mitesh had carefully kept hidden. Jessica had suspected that her husband was being unfaithful, and her instincts were correct. However, it was not what she expected. Mitesh was hiding his true sexual orientation. His marriage to Jessica was just a cover, a way to hide his true feelings for other men. 2 years into their marriage, Mitesh met Amit, an Indian man who was openly gay. Despite their cultural differences, they men quickly fell in love and secretly met each other whenever Mitesh was away on business. Unbeknownst to Jessica, her husband was leading a double life, pretending to be the perfect spouse while carrying on an illicit affair. In 2016, Amit moved to Australia, but Amit and Mitesh continued their relationship. Mitesh had had a plan to become same-sex parents with Amit by using Jessica's embryos and finding a surrogate. Mitesh had informed Amit that Jessica was having in vitro fertilization, IVF, and had asked if they could be together after this plan, to which Amit had replied that it would depend on the results. Mitesh confided in Amit, stating that eventually there would be no more obstacles in their relationship. In a message, Mitesh chillingly wrote, "Jessica's days are numbered." It was later discovered that Mitesh was secretly taking fertility-affecting medication to avoid intimate relations with Jessica. The investigation revealed that Mitesh's internet search history was reconstructed. He had searched for how to get rid of his wife, Hindu funeral, and procedure for obtaining insurance payments for the murder of a spouse. Notably, Jessica had a £2 million life insurance policy. After her death, Mitesh planned to claim the money and use it to buy a property in Australia. In the weeks leading up to Jessica's death, Mitesh had been actively searching for a new home, aiming to create a comfortable environment for his future family. Investigators analyzed their cell phones and found incriminating messages. They also discovered a fitness app that tracked the number of steps taken by Jessica's. The data showed that Jessica's phone had not moved since 8:04 p.m. However, 15 minutes later, the phone recorded 14 steps, suggesting that either Jessica had made her last movements or someone had moved the device. In contrast, Mitesh's phone data revealed high physical activity and an elevated heart rate in the period leading up to his wife's murder, which was unusual for him. Between 7:44 p.m. and 8:30 p.m., Jessica's husband, Mitesh, walked up and down the stairs multiple times, creating false evidence of a burglary by throwing objects around the house. Before calling 911, he went upstairs to conceal evidence, including a hard drive from a surveillance camera in the safe of the pharmacy he and his wife owned. During the police investigation, they found stolen jewelry, £25,000, and a couple of gold bars, which Mitesh claimed had been taken during the robbery. They also discovered a roll of duct tape similar to the one used to bind the victim's arms and legs. The torn end of the tape matched the piece taken as evidence from Jessica's body. To create an alibi, Mitesh had to go to his workplace the evening after the pizza party. Despite planning for years, he was remarkably careless and left a trail of evidence behind. Furthermore, DNA analysis found under Jessica's fingernails showed that it matched Mitesh's DNA. Mitesh had scratch marks on his neck, which he attributed to a fall. During the investigation and subsequent trial, Mitesh, the accused, denied any wrongdoing. He claimed that his interactions with Jessica were mere coincidence. The 3-week trial strung together the developments in the case. It was established that he attacked his wife as soon as she entered the house. She fought back and scratched the attacker but was eventually controlled. Initially, Mitesh had planned to kill his wife by administering a lethal dose of insulin. However, This method takes a long time to be effective, and there is a risk that the plan will be discovered. To ensure a quicker outcome, Mitesh suffocated his wife by putting a bag over her head. To make sure his wife was dead, he strangled her with his hands and then used a rope. The prosecution presented physical evidence, including empty ampules found in Mitesh Patel's laptop bag, which linked him to the crime. Mitesh brutally murdered his wife, Jessica, in their home, a place they had shared for years. The entire ordeal took only 20 minutes. He then brutally tied her up to create the appearance that she had been robbed. Following the murder, Mitesh went about his day as usual, even stopping at a pizza place and calling Jessica's phone. The news of her death left both families in shock and disbelief. Tragically, Jessica had been seeking help in the months leading up to her murder, but her cries for aid were ignored. Only her sister seemed worried, but they couldn't do much to help either. The jury deliberated for 2 hours before delivering a guilty verdict. On December 5, 2018, the court sentenced Mitesh Patel to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Mitesh showed no remorse for his actions, and it seemed that the only person he felt sorry for was himself. The family was still grappling with the loss of Jessica's death, remembering her in their daily prayers and cherishing the happy moments they had shared together. It is unlikely that they will ever forgive Mitesh for his heinous crime. According to Hindu beliefs, her soul must be reborn. Since she suffered a lot in life and was unhappy but remained a good person, in the next incarnation, she will be rewarded. At least that was a comfort to her loved ones. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Nicholas Wilcox. Nicholas was born on January 15, 1978 at Day Kimball Hospital in Putnam, Connecticut. Nicholas's grandfather was a boat builder, and his father devoted his life to the construction industry. After graduating in 1996, Nicholas joined the family business and became a roofer. Together with his brother Donald, he worked as a contractor and built up their own client base. At the age of 23, Nicholas got married. He and his wife Kathy, a former classmate, tied the knot. A year later, they had a daughter, and 3 years later, they had twins. During these years, Nicholas worked hard to provide a comfortable life for his family. Nicholas's family and friends say that despite his busy work schedule, he was a thoughtful and caring boyfriend and father. However, he spent too much time working, which eventually led to the breakup of the family. The divorce occurred shortly after the birth of their young children. Nevertheless, he continued to maintain communication with them and support the family. In early 2017, Nicholas sought new opportunities and moved to Florida. This new location promised better jobs and a significant increase in the number of customers and allowing for work almost all year round. Moreover, the state's warm and sunny weather created excellent conditions not only for living but also for business development. In coastal areas often affected by severe storms, so Nicholas's profession became very necessary. After each bad weather event, many houses were damaged and needed repairs and reinforcement. After returning to Connecticut to raise his family, Nicholas returned to Florida. He initially lived in an apartment in Fort Lauderdale but later moved to the suburbs to reduce housing costs. There, he lived in a duplex with his neighbors, Isabella Tagliarini and Eric Robinson. The hurricane season had begun, and Nicholas was struggling with many daily orders. At that time, a hurricane was approaching the area where he lived and worked. The storm had grown into a powerful Category 5 Atlantic tropical storm, with winds of about 177 miles per hour. An emergency warning was issued before the dangerous weather event occurred, and about 7 million people were evacuated from coastal areas. Nicholas spent all his time preparing buildings, reinforcing homes, boarding up windows and doors, and then helping to clean up the damage caused by the natural disaster. All of these tasks were his primary duties, so he was paid to perform them. However, He often helps others without taking any credit. In an interview, Nicholas's brother admitted that Nicholas never refused to help others. In September 2017, as Florida braced for a devastating hurricane, Nicholas was busy making plywood windows. Supply shortages had created long lines at stores. In one of those lines, a woman named Pamela approached Nicholas and told him she didn't have enough materials to reinforce her house. After hearing this, Nicholas was committed to solving the problem. That same evening, he brought her the 7 missing plywood panels and installed them in all the doors and windows of her house, refusing to accept payment, even though he had spent the entire day searching for the necessary materials. Nicholas was deeply moved by Pamela's plight. She was alone with her children and needed outside help. In response, Pamela thanked him. The storm caused a lot of devastation, leaving Nicholas with a lot of long-term work to do. So he decided to hire his next-door neighbor, a woman named Isabella, as his assistant. Her duties included cleaning up after projects and setting up tools for the job. As they spent more time together, their friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship. On September 3rd, they made a special vow, which was written in blood on paper, resembling a form of engagement and a promise to live a long and happy life with many children. Although they loved each other dearly, their relationship could not be considered perfect. Almost immediately, small problems and disagreements began to arise. On September 22nd, they had a serious argument, which forced Isabella to leave the house and spend the night in a hotel. However, by the next morning, they had resolved their disagreement and reconciled. Isabella expressed that she felt a lack of attention and respect from Nicholas, while Nicholas believed that Isabella had exaggerated the problems. On October 5, 2017, on the riverbank in the suburbs of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, USA, a horrific incident occurred. Law enforcement officers discovered the body of a man wrapped in a tarp and tightly bound with a belt on both sides. The body was found at the bottom of a trash bin behind a local supermarket. The autopsy results revealed that the victim had suffered multiple severe blows and stab wounds. Apparently, the man had been severely beaten for an extended period. As a result, his jaw and teeth were broken, with some fragments having penetrated his respiratory tract. Most of the bones in his face and head were fractured. There were 6 blunt force injuries on his skull. In addition, he had 6 stab wounds in his neck, 7 in his throat, and several in his upper chest. The injuries on the victim's body were so severe that some areas of flesh had been cut away. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the head, substantial blood loss, and asphyxiation. The victim was identified as Nicholas Wilcox, 39, from Putnam, Connecticut, and this was confirmed by his brother. Several people have come under suspicion in the investigation into Nicholas' death, including his girlfriend, Isabella Tagliarini, and her ex-boyfriend, Eric Robinson. Both were Nicholas' neighbors in the duplex apartment where he had moved. The house was designed for 2 families, with separate living spaces, each with its own yard and entrance, a common type of property in Florida. Eric, the first tenant, sublet the vacant units, and Isabella, 38, was the first person he invited. She was from Brazil, where she worked as a flight attendant for a national airline. In 2010, she divorced and immigrated to the United States with her children. She successfully married an American, which helped her obtain her dream green card. However, that marriage lasted only until 2016, as their feelings gradually faded, leading to their separation. That same year, she began dating Eric. Her new partner was from a small town in Massachusetts, had never been married, and had no children. Their romantic relationship developed quickly, although it was occasionally tumultuous. Isabella and Eric led a passionate but complicated relationship. However, Eric often changed the way he expressed his feelings, sometimes cheerful and friendly, but at other times dark and aggressive. Due to this erratic behavior, they broke up and reconciled many times. In June 2017, shortly before Nicholas moved in, they had separated again. Nicholas had known the couple for about 6 months and maintained contact with them. When he mentioned wanting to save on rent, Eric offered him to move in and share the expenses. Initially, the three people had a wonderful relationship. They respected each other's personal space yet often spent time together. However, over time, problems began to arise. It turned out that Eric was using and possessing illegal substances, which explained his erratic behavior and mood swings. On August 23, 2017, Derek was arrested for possession and use of a controlled substance. He had reconciled with Isabella shortly before and was actually in a relationship with her at the time of his arrest. At the time, Nicholas was living with them under the same roof. After Eric was arrested, Nicholas and Isabella had no idea when he would be released or what their future would hold. They could be evicted at any moment, so they threw themselves into jobs to provide a steady source of income. Luckily for Nicholas, there were plenty of jobs, but not for Isabella. She struggled to find suitable work, so she started helping her neighbor in the construction industry. On October 5, 2017, a man called the local police. In the call, he introduced himself as Isabella's ex-boyfriend and asked the police to contact her, as she had information about a recent case. Although the call lacked specific details, the police immediately responded and called Isabella. From the way she spoke, it was clear that she was in a state of agitation. When asked by the police what had happened, she replied that everything was fine. The only thing that was worrying her at the time was an argument with her lover. She explained that he had left her and gone in an unknown direction. However, when the police mentioned the call from her ex-boyfriend, her tone immediately changed. She began to cry and confessed that her lover was not going anywhere, he was dead. She also added that she knew where the body was and was willing to show it to the police. Law enforcement arrived at the house to which Isabella had provided an address. The house had boarded up windows and doors, apparently in preparation for an upcoming storm. Inside, there was a strong smell of cleaning products and paint, indicating that the place had been recently cleaned. In one of the bedrooms, detectives noticed that the walls and floors had been hastily and roughly painted. This might have been done to hide something rather than for routine renovations. Their suspicions were confirmed when they discovered hydrogen peroxide containers and small bloodstains on the bedding and nightstands. It was clear that someone had replaced the old mattress and tried to clean the area, but the blood was still evident everywhere. Police suspected that this was the scene of a violent crime that Isabella had attempted to clean up but was too late to fully erase. During the conversation, she explained that she had been under the influence of sedatives during the phone call, which accounted for her unusual behavior. The mentally unstable woman was taken to the police station. At this point, the police contacted her ex-boyfriend, who provided some information about the incident. According to him, she had called him and told him about the case. According to her first testimony, around 2 a.m. on October 5th, a man had come to the duplex, then found Nicholas and her sleeping. He became angry when he saw Nicholas in the bedroom. He woke Isabella by holding a knife to her neck to prevent her from screaming. At that time, she saw Nicholas lying next to her, apparently having difficulty breathing. However, masked man would not let her see any further and pushed her out of the room. Masked man then used brass knuckles and a baseball bat to beat the defenseless Nicholas. After the beating, masked man wrapped the body in a tarp and secured it with a belt. Under threat from masked man, she helped him dispose of the body. Detectives did not understand why Isabella called her ex-boyfriend instead of calling the police. Isabella explained that she felt confused and needed support and advice. According to her, the criminal had asked her to clean up and erase all traces. The criminal then returned the phone he had taken earlier and left. Isabella's confession raised suspicions and needed to be re-examined. In addition, injuries such as bruises and scratches on Isabella's body, which she claimed were caused by masked man after Nicholas' death, were also noted. Officers began their investigation by searching for Eric. They located his hiding place. Medical examiners and forensic pathologists were also present at the scene to conduct necessary investigations. He was released from prison on October 3rd and is currently living at a different address. During this time, he met and began living with a new woman named Merida. On the night of October 5th, Merida stated that her boyfriend received a phone call and immediately left. He returned home around 5 a.m., quickly packed his belongings, and left without explaining why. When asked if she noticed any blood on her boyfriend's clothing, Merida said she did not see anything suspicious. Eric was found around 8 p.m., 4 miles from the home. He refused to cooperate with the investigation and was subsequently detained for further questioning. During the interrogation, Eric provided an account that differed from Isabella's version of events. According to Eric, Isabella contacted him on the night of October 5th, even though she had been forbidden from contacting him immediately after his arrest. Eric also claimed that Isabella admitted to him that she had attacked Nicholas while under the influence of drugs, leading to Nicholas's death. After regaining consciousness, Isabella realized she could not solve the problem on her own and asked for help. In return, Isabella promised Eric that they would get back together and restart their relationship. Because Eric still had strong feelings for her, he agreed to these terms. The investigation revealed that Isabella is not as innocent as previously believed. In fact, she has come to the attention of police on several occasions in the past. On September 22nd, Nicholas and Isabella had a heated argument that extended beyond their room. Under the influence of Xanax and other drugs, Isabella became upset and destroyed some of Nicholas's belongings. Worse, she also damaged Nicholas's car. As a result, Nicholas felt compelled to contact the police regarding this incident. Isabella had an explosive personality and a hot temper, which made Nicholas fear for his life. However, they reconciled the next morning, and Nicholas withdrew the complaint. Investigators then spoke with Eric, who described Isabella as having an explosive personality and a hot temper. He also noted that Nicholas had warned her during their argument, threatening to contact immigration services if such incidents occurred again. Nicholas warned her that he would make a damaging remark that could severely affect her future. For Isabella, the opportunity to live in the United States was extremely important, so the fear of deportation was terrifying. It is possible that during another argument, Isabella might react violently and feel threatened. Her desire to remain in the United States may have motivated the crime. Detectives did not want to rely solely on existing statements, so they began interviewing people close to those involved. A key witness was Nicholas and Isabella's neighbor. The neighbor's window overlooked the courtyard of the duplex. Neighbors testified that they saw Eric arrive in his car on the night of the incident. Eric then took some tools and trash bags before driving away. The investigation into the case against Isabella yielded substantial evidence. She was summoned for questioning again on October 11th. At that time, she had not been arrested and had voluntarily come to the police station. Based on video surveillance footage, detectives determined that on that fateful night, she personally transported Nicholas's body and disposed of it in the trash. Throughout the process, she acted calmly and methodically, showing no signs of fear or agitation. She met Eric that night but remained relaxed and friendly. During further questioning, Isabella's story changed. Isabella claimed that Eric had threatened to kill her and her children, saying that she was forced to kill Nicholas. However, investigators remained cautious in their conclusions. They found the histories of both Eric and Isabella suspicious. Eric had a troubled past with the law, having come to the attention of the police in 2001 primarily for drug possession and distribution. At the same time, Isabella had many reasons to be concerned about him. In August 2016, he committed aggravated assault against a woman. In June 2017, he was arrested for strangulation and for drug possession that same year. Neighbors reported that they feared him and tried to stay away due to his aggressive and unstable behavior. The next interview with Isabella took place on October 14th. Although she claimed not to have touched Nicholas, experts found traces of her DNA on the man's body, which contradicted her testimony. According to the investigation, Isabella was involved in the violence against Nicholas, at least in the handling of the body and the destruction of evidence. However, no evidence was found to establish any specific crime. During the investigation, Isabella was briefly detained before being released and awaiting trial. People were eagerly anticipating the trial's commencement. However, due to various obstacles and delays, the trial did not take place until 5 years later. During the time, the prosecution clearly formulated its evidence and tactics, while the defense carefully reviewed all the gathered information. In addition, another important piece of evidence was discovered. The prosecution recovered Eric's deleted social media account, which he had used to discuss the crime against Nicholas. During these years, Isabella pleaded guilty to the prosecution, admitting to a lesser crime in exchange for a lighter sentence. She agreed to testify against Eric. On April 10, 2023, the trial of Eric finally took place. The prosecution argued that Eric was solely responsible for the crime against Nicholas. Isabella's role was not considered that of an accomplice, but rather as a witness who had tampered with evidence and helped erase evidence, which is also punishable by criminal penalties. During the trial, Eric was charged with attempted murder. Despite Torini's testimony being contradictory and inconsistent, her lawyer maintained her innocence. During the proceedings, the prosecution focused on witness testimony describing Eric's unusual behavior on the night of the murder. To avoid being monitored via GPS, Eric used his new girlfriend's car, which did not have a satellite tracking system, and he also left his cell phone at home. Other details have emerged in this case. After the incident, Isabella and Eric had a private meeting in which Isabella explained that she was under the influence of a powerful sedative and feared for her life. After reviewing the evidence, it became clear that jealousy led to Nicholas's brutal and senseless murder. Although Isabella claimed she had ended the relationship, Eric still considered her his girlfriend. After his release, the defendant returned home, but the changes that had occurred during that time had made him even angrier and more hateful. During this period, he plotted revenge against his rival. He carried out a cold-blooded attack when the couple was most vulnerable while they were sleeping. His first attack resulted in the death of Nicholas. He then attempted to destroy the evidence by scattering it in various locations. The murder weapon was found in a dumpster, and Nicholas's body was wrapped in a tarp and hidden in a trash can. Isabella then painted over the blood splattered on the wall and cleaned up the area. Throughout these actions, Eric was in contact with Isabella and directed her actions. Ultimately, Eric, 51, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for second-degree murder. Isabella was convicted of assisting a criminal, but threats and coercion were considered mitigating factors, so she received a suspended sentence until 2026. It is noteworthy that Isabella was willing to do anything to obtain U.S. citizenship. It was revealed that 10 days after Eric was detained, he and Isabella signed another pledge in which Eric promised to marry Isabella. But he did not fulfill that promise. She is preparing to marry him right after he resolves his relationship with her ex. It seems that she does not care much about whom she marries, as long as she can maintain her U.S. citizenship. Isabella's main purpose in having relationships with men is to use them for her own benefit. In many ways, These men are all predisposed to marry. It is clear that U.S. citizenship is her top concern, even if it comes at a high price.